always know where she is. She knows where I am, so it's so easy to plan stuff.
Good morning, everyone.
Not to count on
We're going to call this meeting to order. Today is Thursday, June 22nd, 2023. It is 9 a.m. All the council members are present. Town manager, town clerk, town attorney is on his way. He'll be here shortly. If you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I was waiting for you.
Yeah.
I don't see any leaves.
Thank you. All right, our first item for discussion is the Trust for Public Land.
People's gonna sneak in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Mayor has a message you'd like to get in before we get to that first
Just
item.
want to do this at the beginning of the meeting because we have a lot, and a lot of folks were helped. Some folks were not, but many folks were. And many folks have inquired as to when the next one will be because they were out of town or weren't able to attend or have some additional follow-up questions. So those have been announced. They will be June 27th, which is, I think, Tuesday in Fort Myers, and the 28th and the 29th in Punta Gorda. You'll want to bring all of your key information, driver's license, all your policy information, any pictures or documentation that you have, repair estimates, any additional insurance-related information. Just bring your whole packet with you. Again, the one in Fort Myers is Tuesday, June 27th at Florida Southwestern State College, which is 8099 College Parkway, AA 177, Fort Myers, Florida. And then again, there's one in Punta Gorda on Wednesday and Thursday at Charlotte County Event Center. They both, all of the events go from 9 to 5. I would check before you drive out there with the CFO's office to make sure that your company is going to be in attendance before you drive out there. They'll generally have a list close before the event to all the folks who come. I thank Beach Talk Radio for doing an article about it yesterday, and I encourage you to attend if you're still having challenges. I would encourage you to, if you have a public adjuster and or a legal counsel, I would consult with them before you go so you can work in concert with your professional to strategize the best approach with your insurance company as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You got it.
Now, can we have the PIO send out the information on this too with the dates?
I had sent this to the PIO, so hopefully she'll be texting all that out on all of our social media forums.
And I'll just point out what a great success it was last time. I talked to a couple of people who walked in with problems and walked out with a check.
You know, it's really, I appreciate you saying that, Councilor Veach. It's really tragic that it has to come to this. Quite frankly, these companies should be responding and paying legitimate claims up front. But this is what it is. It is helpful. It's sad that it has to come to this. I do appreciate the CFO's office for doing them, but it's sad that we've gotten to this point, but they really can be helpful to folks who are still struggling.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Trust for Public Land. Come on up, sir.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, council members, city manager. My name's Charles Hines. Thank you for having me here today. I have my colleague, Joy Leggett Murphy. We're both from the Trust for Public Land, and what I'd like to do is take a minute and tell you who we are, what we do, and how we do it, and how we think we can help the town with some opportunities. How we got involved is we were contacted by FEMA. We worked with them on other things, and they know how we work. I see that hopefully you took a minute and looked through some of the things I've handed to you that gives us some background of our organization, our team that we would put together to work with you all, and some other projects that we've done in the state of Florida. Trust for Public Lands has been around for 50 years. It's a national nonprofit, 501c3, and our national mission is to give people access to the outdoors and to protect land so that people can get out and get all the benefits that the outdoors bring. And, you know, Councilman King, you said that you mentioned that you saw me make a presentation to the MPO, to your all's MPO, in regards to a trail project that we're working on in Lee County. My quick background for you is I was a Sarasota County Commissioner for 8 years. I've sat in your seat. I know what you're going through. We were never hit anywhere close to this hard, but I understand the process. a land use attorney in my past life. Joy was a county attorney for Manatee County and is now an in-house counsel for TPL. So we're local people. I grew up in Sarasota County, grew up in Venice. So I just want to let you know that. And so what TPL does nationally is work with local governments to assist them to buy properties, do parks, do trails. We can negotiate the deals, work with landowners, close on the property, and do all the due diligence that certain times local governments don't have the staff or the expertise to do that, or just, frankly, I can say this as a past commissioner, government buying land is a very difficult thing. When you sit here as the five of you because of Sunshine Law and try to negotiate a price when the seller's sitting there in the audience can be very hard to do. We can play that role for you all and then be able to work with your staff knowing that you are ultimately the takeout partner is the term that we use. We can buy land, we can hold it, but we don't keep it forever. We want to turn it over to you into the public trust with a plan or an idea. So now how this would work here locally is working with FEMA, working with the state of Florida Emergency Management. We can go to work and work with your staff identifying properties that you feel might benefit the public, beach access, restoration, parks, those types of things, and work with the landowner to bring it to a contract, do the due diligence, and sell and buy that using some federal grant money, hazardous mitigation money is the main one that's being targeted here. But there are other opportunities for funding. And then be able to close, and then you ultimately take that property as you already have with your beachfront properties or your parks. So this is a little bit unique because of the funding source and the timing of all of this. We obviously know your residents are struggling and are stressed, are trying, what do we do? What can I build? Do I want to rebuild? And so we want to introduce our organization to you and explain our experience and how we work with landowners. And as a nonprofit, I think it would be a little smoother and maybe more welcoming for some of the residents that might be looking to do this versus maybe a developer that's just knocking on the door. We work based upon appraisals and fair market value, and then also with what the funding from FEMA and that hazardous mitigation grant allows. So broad picture today, we've been discussing and having meetings with your staff and FEMA and the state to try to get to these types of agreements so that we can go to work basically and talk to these landowners. The key one is identifying properties that you all would want us to work on. There's a deadline of August 29th that, Jason, you're serving on that board to get those properties submitted so that they're on the list and will qualify for that grant program. So I know this is the last meeting you have before August, but a lot can get done in between now and then with your staff. Hopefully, I'll answer any questions you have that you would authorize us, or at least, I don't know if you can take a vote today on a planning commission meeting or how it works, but at least feel comfortable enough that we have done this in the past. We do this all across the country for other local governments. How I met TPL was just a thing like this. They came to us in Sarasota County and said, let us help you do and purchase this rail corridor in Sarasota County. They did the deal, handed it to us, actually helped us run a referendum to raise the money. That deal was closed, and now that legacy trail exists and is open if you ever want to come for a bike ride. I know you have way more important things to do right now, but that is very similar to the one that we're doing in Lee County. So that's how I got involved, had a lot of respect for the organization, and after I ended my term on the commission, I said, I think I'd like to work with these folks because what they're doing is really for the public good. So hopefully we can take what was a horrible situation, and as you all come out of this and grow and get stronger, all of a sudden you're a better town because you were able to acquire some of these properties that those opportunities didn't exist before. So we look forward to working with you if we can.
Charles, I appreciate you being here. And just a little background for my council members that maybe not know. After one of our meetings before Andy was here, I spoke with some of the people at FEMA. In driving up and down Estero Boulevard since the storm, you see a lot of land that's open, obviously, that we're never going to see again become available, probably. So I spoke with them after the meeting, FEMA I'm talking about, and asked them if there was any kind of mechanisms that we could do to try to acquire some of these lands for public in perpetuity. And she recommended you guys right away. So that's how this whole thing started, because I thought this would be a good time for our community to be able to try to get some more parks like Newton Park, to be able to spread them out throughout the island, that we could keep an open corridor, we could keep a, walkability, bikeability, I think is kind of the thing we were looking at doing. But I appreciate you being here. I was unable to make the first meeting when you guys were in town. I had a conflict, but I appreciate you being here. I'm fairly familiar with what you guys do, and talking to FEMA and doing some research, but I won't hog up a lot of time. I'm sure there's some questions from my fellow members up here that would like to pick your brain a little bit.
Thank you.
Any
I
questions?
would just say, can you emphasize again that we're not going out with eminent domain.
Correct.
We're looking at people that are willing to sell their
Yeah.
property.
And that's the way we work as a nonprofit, willing seller, willing buyer. And that's where I've kind of mentioned the appraisal process. So a landowner can feel that it's fair, right? And so will you. Obviously, you're going to see those types of things. And with this grant program, it has some specific requirements. But yeah, absolutely. It's not taking people's property. And I don't know, I guess, like I said, having sat in your seat, I understand and have taken calls from residents that are nervous and don't know what to do. And I think you all can feel comfortable with the way our organization works. I think I sent some recommendations from some other communities in the Panhandle that we've dealt with the oil spill, the BP oil spill, and funding from that we were hired by local governments up there to do something very similar to this, to use some of that money to make a horrible situation better. But yes, it's definite. If we came and talked to a landowner, we would be a willing seller.
I just wanted to make sure that,
Good point.
because on the rumor mill, or I guess what's called the Coconut Telegraph, I've been seeing eminent domain popping up a lot, and I don't know where that came from or why, but
That's not how we'd work, no.
yep, I just wanted to share that.
So I have a process question, if you will. So are there two different streams? Like, we would identify properties that we would be interested in, or there's properties already for sale that you would become the broker with, but they're listed with other agents?
Right. We don't work as a broker in like the legal sense in regards to commissions and those types of things. So the answer is kind of yes to both. Wouldn't just target properties that are for sale.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there might be some for sale that you as a council say, we're not interested in. But there might be some. So we would contact that broker and contact the landowner and try to put a deal together for that. There could be others that aren't for sale yet, or people may not think about selling it, but you all say, well, that's right next to one of our public beach accesses. We know that property's been damaged. I know Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith lives in Minnesota. She may not know what to do. Let's call her. And maybe she would say, well, you know what, I didn't know what to do. Thank you for calling me. How would this work? So to me, it's don't box yourself in regards to just properties that are for sale. Take a bigger vision of what you want to do as a town and where you want to go. Get those properties on the list that would qualify for, federal grant money. And we'll try to see what we can put together.
So then, as a 501c3, how do you stay in existence? Do you get a percentage of that through FEMA, or how does that work?
And that's what we got to work out with your staff. There's two ways. If we were in a non-emergency situation, normally what we would do is you got a ranch owner, 3,000 acres. Local government, state government says we'd like to, buy and protect that property. we would normally go work with the landowner. We'd put the deal together, do all the due diligence like I was describing. We would buy it and then transfer it. The landowner gives us a donation. That's what we seek, all right? That could happen here, but we have another funding source that what they do is they fund the acquisition, but they also fund the cost of, closing, surveys, appraisals. So we need to work out with our agreement with you all that would, bill you, but it would flow through to the state to be reimbursed for that time. And we haven't finalized the agreement. I just told, I was saying to Jason, we brought it with us today, that we kind of created it in a hybrid way, that if a landowner, for their tax benefit, may say, can we do a donation? Great, that covers our cost. That leaves potentially a bigger pot of money for the next one, that maybe the landowner doesn't want to do a donation, and then we got to bill the state. Does that make sense? Okay. So this one's a little bit different. Normally, like the last deal we did with the city of Jacksonville, they had a fund of money that was created from a referendum that they bought for environmentally sensitive lands. So they had $50 million sitting there, say. Well, they retained us to say, go get these properties. And they just paid us based upon cost and time. And that worked out fine. But sometimes, normally, I'd say more what we do is from the landowner donation.
Now, so you're you're dealing exclusively with acquisition. Do you ever deal with right-of-ways or easements to put in, like, paths and that kind of thing?
I'm not going to say never. And the easement type of things that we do usually deal with trails. You could potentially have a rail corridor that they want to keep the underlying ownership, but they would sell us, and then we would sell to you or the local government the easements rights for that trail. I'd have to see, again, a willing seller. I got to picture that, like a road right away or widening. I'm trying to think how it would play in this situation. What are you thinking of?
Well, for one example, and this is something I kind of have in a proposal, is that we have like 2 sections maybe where we could have a bike route that goes away from Estero, but then there's a couple of bottlenecks in there. And in one case, it'd be like on the Red Coconut, which they're redeveloping. So if they were to grant us an easement for a path, instead of going through the work of breaking it off and making it a sole ownership, that would
Right.
be a much easier path, probably more acceptable to them.
Sure. So the private landowner, yes, to answer your question, and that's just the example of like when I've done it, and I'm in negotiations right now in regards to a railroad. They want to keep the underlying property, but that's not the one in Lee County. It's, but they would sell us an easement and to allow the trail to go through. So yeah, that would just be something we'd have to talk about, and that wouldn't necessarily be, I don't think, under this hazard mitigation, but we do that work as well.
So the other point is, I know that one of the stumbling blocks we have here is cost-benefit analysis, because the price they're asking for property on the island after the storm is pretty amazing.
Right.
And how big of a hurdle is that?
Well, luckily in this situation, it's easier for me because we do third-party appraisals. And as a local government, you're not going to overpay for something. And in this grant program, there's some limits on the percentages that can be paid. So I think a landowner would feel comfortable that here's the appraisal. It's not my offer to you, or it's not, your demand to me for the price. Here's the appraisal. We share it with them. And that's what it is. And, as a nonprofit, same type of thing, to protect those types of donations and so forth. We can't overpay for something. So if someone's asking $10 million for a property, they can ask whatever they want. And if a private person wants to pay them $10 million, but the appraisal says it's $8 million, that's what we got to go with. And so we'll try to negotiate that deal, but I can't say, okay, landowner, I'll buy it from you for 10, and then come to you all and say, you're the takeout partner on this. you're going to say, well, no, we can only pay what the appraisal is. You know, there's some situations that you could maybe get other private funding to coming in, but I don't want to overcomplicate this. But so that's how we do it. So to me, the landowner, if they're asking just sky-high prices, we'll know that pretty quickly and say, if that's where you really are, we'll move to the next one. But if they feel that they want to get a fair market value for the property and not have to deal with piles, I'm pointing behind you, piles of rubble, this might be the time to do it.
So it also sounds like maybe the kind of candidate you're looking for is maybe someone who has a lot in it, they're not looking to rebuild. It has some park value, and then they would much rather leave that as a legacy as opposed to sell that on the market and have just a house. But
Right. But I would argue back that you are selling it on the market because of the appraisal and fair market value. What is the market value? I mean, appraisal is just an opinion. My opinion may be different than yours in regards to the value of it, but it's just not me knocking on your door and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, your house looks terrible. The town's not going to let you rebuild. It's, you know, it's going to take you 5 years to even, you know, get back here, and you'll never get the use and benefit out of this. I'll give you 50 cents on the dollar. That's not the way we work. And that goes back to the willing seller, willing buyer, where we feel confident that it's fair for everybody involved. And that's the only way that we can work.
But if someone were to offer less, of course, if they were offered a lower price, you would
Sure.
maybe.
Yeah.
And have you ever done anything where you've accepted a below market value in exchange for like
Yeah.
naming a park after somebody?
Exactly. See, that's what's unique here. And some people really say, you know, I use the ranch example. You know, we're losing ranch land, you know, across the state pretty quickly. And so you have a 5-generation ranching family that says, here comes development. It's encroaching on me. It's encroaching on me. I know I could get more money if I sold it to a developer. But my grandfather would turn over his grave if he knew this was all just, you know, condos. Yes, I'll work with you. Now, can we have some legacy rights in regards to naming? Sometimes you have conservation easements where they still have some use rights. So it's less than what maybe the developer would pay to build homes on it. So we have a lot of those flexibilities, and we all know this, each piece of property is unique. So it depends on the situation. But yeah, the naming rights, and a lot of people will say, well, I would be proud to know that this property will always be open space. And that's, so yes.
Thank you.
I would just, first of all, thank you again for being here. I appreciate this initiative. It comes at a critical time for our island. I would just say that your offer to help us get into the weeds on this, I would encourage you to be persistent with us. We've got a great staff, but they've got a ton on their plate.
Right.
And with your expertise and your team and your sort of focus on this, I just encourage you to really drive this bus. And because I think you see pretty broad support here at the council. So help staff as best you can because they've got so much on their plate. But I love what you're trying to achieve, and I think it's a great concept. So
Yeah, our timing, there is a lot of work that's already been done and is being done right now. Your staff has already done a good job with Jacobs. Is that the other name of the company? Yeah, Tidal Basin. Tidal Basin. Putting all this together, because the one hard deadline that's very important that we meet is that August 29th date to get the list of properties. And you'll probably put more in there than you may, I think it would be beneficial to have more than less. So all of this needs to be put together in the next 2 months. And then after that and everything's done, then we can go start talking to some landowners and so forth. So there's a lot of coordination between FEMA, the state emergency management, the town, your contractors that you've hired to do work, and us. So, yeah.
I guess
Hear
what
ya.
I'm saying is thank you for that. And I, as much as you can help us through this process, we're going to need it because we got our hands full. But
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
certainly a worthy
Yeah.
cause. Yeah.
And why, well, personally, as too much background to me, but why this is exciting to me is, born and raised in Southwest Florida, served in a seat like you all. And TPL's mission is to do things like this where, this is just a horrible circumstance that it came about. But if we can assist local government and create parks and open space and public access to, the beaches, which seems to be constantly decreasing because of private ownership, that's what we do. And so we're happy to be here and hope that we have a good, long relationship with you all.
Charles, quick question for you before you, again, thanks you for being here and explaining it. I think you've opened up a lot of eyes and piqued a lot of interest. You'd mentioned that August is kind of the deadline. Is there a mechanism in place to talk with some owners? I've talked to a couple homeowners, specifically on the beach, that may be interested in this program, but obviously the houses, lots being up for sale, they may not be here in 2 months. So
Right.
is there a mechanism or a way to communicate with properties that are for sale now that may be interested in being part of this program?
I think you get them on the list. If you know of those, talk with your staff and see if they get on the list. And if to say, again, this is just one funding source. There could be others, and we've tried to identify some of them. If people are interested, they can, you got my
Okay.
card, they can
Yeah.
call me.
Okay.
And I think talk with your staff. This is just the mechanism or process that we're working through to set it up with coordination with FEMA. But if someone else just wants to do it the normal way, or the normal way that we do it,
Mhm.
that's fine too.
Okay. Yeah, they were, the two I'm speaking of specifically, they're in no hurry to sell. They don't
Okay.
need the money, so they're not in.
And
not in a
that
hurry.
might be a better situation, that we work with something that, there isn't that pressure, there isn't that, and the deadline. And there may be people like that would say, I would rather work with the town and have this property do something in perpetuity that's better than the way it is right now. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other
Mayor,
questions?
yeah,
Yes.
if I may, I've had a conversation as well as with this group, but with the Land Trust of Florida, and there's funding there to reimburse us for anything we own. We can't take it forcibly, but we have to own it. So that's this component. And then once we have it, then there could be another part besides the grant part. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this. So I think I've talked to each of you at some time or another about something similar to this, even in the short time I've been here. So we really
We have-
appreciate them coming in.
Yeah, we have, our main office is in Tallahassee, and we have, staff up there that know where to find money for these types of things. Because a lot of times, it doesn't come just from one pot. You need to take a little bit from here, a little bit from here, to put that overall purchase price together. And, that right there's another one. And they're out there. Nothing wrong with private donations either. There's private foundations all around here that say, yeah, we would like to contribute as well. So we have contacts with those. So sometimes you put that $1 together with nickels and dimes.
So Charles, just make sure you're okay. I've had a couple people send me a message here while we've been talking that would like to speak with you. So
Okay.
if you're
Time to
okay
go to
with-
work already.
If you want me to
Well,
share your number,
and-
I'll be
and
happy to.
That's exciting, and again, this is devastation, but your residents love it here, and if they think I have an opportunity to make this a better town for the future, that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
So
Thanks very much.
I do have one more question logistically, because if we have to go under contract with you, we can't make that decision right here because
Right.
we can't vote on anything. So our next council meeting is not until the beginning of August. So how does that play out?
I'll speak for the organization. I don't know if I'll get in trouble or not, but, because these two, this such aligns with our mission, I'm comfortable working with your staff and continue to work with FEMA until your meeting in August.
Assuming
I recognize that.
positive intent and
It's going to
everything
take us a while to get the agreements in place and identify the properties, mapping stuff, so that when you all come back in August, I don't, don't think that I would initiate much contact with people until after you guys have approved it. You need to see the agreement. FEMA, Emily, who we're working with, she couldn't be here today, but we all need to be on the same page. Tidal Basin, the other contractors, that we know exactly who's doing what, when, so we don't have something fall in the cracks in these next 6 weeks to 2 to 3 months. And that's what we're working on. So I'm fine with that. So,
We can't vote on it today, but we can obviously give the town manager direction
Sure.
to,
Okay.
to continue conversations.
Awesome.
yeah, you guys could have said, no, I don't like this guy, I don't like the organization, I want to go another route. I don't think our residents want this. Then I would know. If you guys are sitting here today saying, yeah, this sounds good, we'll get some more information, before our next meeting and get up to speed on where things are going, then I'm happy to move forward on it.
Now, do we need like a point of contact for people, maybe if anybody is interested, a contact that they would send?
Well, one thing, we will need an identified person that I work with closely, I and Joy work closely with in your staff, that would be the point person. And I think it's key. Jason, what's the name of I'm going blank on the council that you sit on that is looking for
Oh,
this?
The local mitigation strategy is what he's referring to with the Disaster Advisory Council. So
Right.
that has to do with the HMGP grant funding, just
Right.
getting us on the list on the priorities.
So I'm not trying to volunteer any of your staff. I don't have the power to do that.
I think
But,
you just did.
Yeah, I think I just did. Sorry, buddy. But, yeah, I need a person that I can know that I can go to and we're on the same page and this is what I'm doing. Here's who I've talked to. Here's how things are going. So that would be very, very helpful to us. Okay?
Thank you, Charles, for
All right.
being here.
Thank
Very
you.
exciting. Thank you very much.
Next item is the Estero Island Small Business Association. Who's speaking today? Game
guess
of
it's-
rock, paper, scissors going on back there.
I guess there's been a name change?
Yes.
Is there a name change here?
I think so. Sorry. You have to take it down to my level. Thank
Before
you.
you start, though, I do have one question. What's the
Yes.
name of the dolphin?
We haven't named the dolphin. We could do a name the dolphin contest, do you think? He is kind of cute, isn't he?
Well, is it a he? I don't. Just curious.
I'm not going to comment on this. Okay? No, there's no comment going.
It's a non-binary dolphin.
Sorry.
I'm here representing, I'm the spokesperson for Let's Go Fort Myers Beach. We're a community group that's been formed to help with rebuild on Fort Myers Beach. My name is Becky Weber. We're looking to be the unified voice for rapid recovery, resiliency, and rebuilding, working in a positive, collaborative way with government. We're made up of residents, property owners, and businesses on the island, okay? Very quickly, and now I need my glasses for this. I wanted to give you we had a meeting. Our first meeting we held with the community, the businesses and residents, property owners. And we had over 118 people that attended in person at the meeting. A lot of people snuck through the back, and we didn't get to count everyone because it was a little backlog there. Nearly 50% of those attendees who filled out a form for us wanted to be on a committee. And of the forms we got back, 42 came from residents, 26 from business owners, and 37 from property owners. We also had over 150 people on the live stream that was done for us by Beach Talk Radio. In the forms that we handed out, that we identified 6 issues that we wanted the folks to vote on for us. Number 1 came in as Times Square downtown, 2 community nodes and amenities, safety, parking, parks and recreation, and the pier. I wanted to let everyone know, if you don't already know, that Alex King has started forward with a group to rebuild the the pier. All right?
I was just going to comment on that because we don't really know what Times Square is going to look like, and that kind of affects how the pier would be rebuilt.
Well, that's what we're talking about here, getting a vision of what we want Times Square to look like and how it would go into the vision statement of the town of Fort Myers Beach. Okay, this is our vision of what we want to be, best destination for, beach community, vacation destination in Southwest Florida. Some kind of vision statement, and their mission is what we're going to do, and then what do we want it to look like? And that our group feels we have to do that very, very quickly. Decide, we don't want to lose our charm. We don't want to lose the vibrancy of the committee, not the committee, the community. And that's why we made our name Let's Go. So let's get the vision in concert with the community and the business owners and the property owners of what we want it to look like, and let's go. One of the things I wanted to also mention, that the number one issue from the meeting, it overwhelmed every other issue, was permitting. And in regards to that, I just wanted to make a quick comment. I'm originally from New Jersey. And after Superstorm Sandy, there was significant damage in beach communities on the Jersey Shore. One of the communities is called Lavalette, and the reason why I'm telling you this is I talked to them last night. And they're very similar to Fort Myers Beach in that they're a barrier island. They got a lot of the damage from the flooding, Seaside Heights, number of communities there. And they put into effect after the storm, they changed their permitting. They put in a period of time where they really relaxed permitting requirements. They told people to go ahead and build. During that period of time, they redid some of the permitting and building codes and things of that hadn't been touched in years in the background. They managed to rebuild very quickly. They had their entire boardwalk and all their pavilions done in less than 5 months of being totally destroyed. They had their businesses start back. All of their roads were destroyed. There were sinkholes all over the island. They lost all of their gas piping, their water piping, and all the electrical as well. So I was asking them how they did it, because I think, and I would suggest, and I think you've already done some of this, I'm sure, to talk to other communities like our own that have been through this. What did they do good? What did they make a mistake on? Let's learn from others and take that going forward, because I think we could move more quickly that way. Now I'm going to introduce Scott Stafford, and he's going to continue with this. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Safford. I live at 189 Sable. I'm a business owner, and I'm on the local planning agency. What I'd like to talk to you guys briefly about is the pink zone or lean urbanism or recovery zone concept. We've done a great job. I can't believe that in 8 months, we've almost got every residential lot available to build. I mean, that's incredible what we've gone through. Staff has been incredible, LPA, town council. I mean, just about every residential lot is buildable. And we see that in the market right now. We see a lot of residential lots starting to be sold. People either decide, hey, I can't do it, or investors come in and say, hey, this is what I can do. So we see what we've done in the market. So it's been fantastic. The same, however, can't be said about the commercial lots. Right now, there's a lot of empty lots. The commercial lots that are selling are usually the ones with existing structures, the Tanzas, tuck away. You know what you're buying. A few lots down by Margaritaville were, that kind of makes sense as an empty lot. But the rest of the lots just aren't selling. And there's a reason for this. Our LDC actually was written to protect what we had. And now it's actually working counterintuitively, we're not able to rebuild. There's parking issues, there's height, density. All these things add up to where most of us are going to be forced to get a CPD. And the CPD is not scalable. A 5,000 square foot lot is going to have the same amount of money as an acre lot. We're going to have to get planners involved, architects. We're going to have to do traffic studies. I don't know why a 5,000 square foot lot needs a $7,000 traffic study, but that's what we're faced against. We've got the land development code on one hand, and then we have the CPD process on the other. So what's the answer to this? Well, one of the answers is what's called a pink zone, where you have lean codes and lean government. And the pink means that it's less red. So you still have LDC components, but you identify an area, and then you have a LDC overlay in that area. And then you decide in that area, well, what can we reduce the parking? Can we reduce the height? Can we make more density? Can we get more height? All these things that, contribute to building back quicker. And then on the other hand, on the government side, we fast track these build backs. So we get a town staff member that's only in charge of the pink zone area. We fast track, we reduce the costs, and we make it so that these guys don't need to get CPDs. If that makes sense. So what are the benefits? Well, we're going to create jobs. We're going to create goods and services for the island. The money actually stays on the island, whereas right now all our money is going off island. There can also be a housing component with this. We can also have some infrastructure, walkability, bikeability, things in that zone we can create. It will also act as a test concept to be replicated in other areas of the island. So right now, we've had some planning sessions, joint LPA and town council meetings. We've talked about this, but we never wanted to change. We're afraid to change. But if we create a zone that's just one small part of the island, we can use this as a test market to see if it'll work in other areas of the island. Our survey, as Becky has stated, number one thing was downtown area, and then number two was the nodes that are coming. So people are we really need to get going on this. What's our next steps? Well, number one, I'd like you guys to get your buy-in. I can answer any questions you have. I'd like to get the town manager's buy-in. And then our next meeting is going to be in July, and we'd like to have it be a pink zone meeting, where we get pink zone experts who have done this before. We get pink zone attorneys to give us some guidance. We get real estate people in, we get developers, we get bankers, and most importantly, we get residents. Because we've seen that residents don't want an 8-story building mid-island. But what's their vision downtown? I mean, we got to work collaboratively. We got to set some expectations and see what we can do. So again, let's go. You guys have any questions?
Yeah, I got a quick question. I've talked to you about this on some of this already, so I've been doing some research on it. There's a couple things that, as you guys are discussing this, I think if you could keep in mind, you talked about parking, just use that as an example.
Right.
Parking needs for, say, the Salty Crab may be different than parking needs for a similar sized property that would be used as a hotel or a boutique hotel.
Right.
One, you could potentially look at really, we want to promote walkability and bikeability, which would be the Salty Crab. Whereas people that are coming to the island, not everyone's going to come by bike or by mass transit. They may drive a car, so they would need a place to park. So looking at those intricacies, if you're in these pink zones that you're talking about, how would that work? If I'm going to build a hotel or I'm going to build a restaurant, how do you decipher what's the right amount of parking, or if you need parking at all in one spot but not the other? So it's just that, how do you made a comment about we're afraid of change. I don't think there's a fear of changing. I think that there's a willingness to not overchange.
Correct.
So,
but that creates fear. But Dan, if we did this in one area, like let's say the downtown district, it'll be a test market. And what you do is you make it a 3-year plan. You don't make it forever. You get 3 years. And then you look at easy wins. You identify easy wins. Easy win would be on that side of the street where we don't need a DEP permit, and maybe concentrate on 7-Elevens, convenience stores, things like that actually provide goods and services for the island. So that's one way to do it. But to get back to your question, I think parking's an issue that we're gonna have to get the county involved. We're gonna have to get landowners involved. We're gonna have to get the town involved. But you know, the parking is just a small component of it. I mean, it's the FAR, it's the density. I mean, all these things add up to where if you have a property, especially a small parcel, like say 5,000 square feet, call that X. The T is the time value of money, and then you have Y, what you can build there. If all those together don't equal Z, then you're not going to build. What's going to happen is everything's going to be masked by big developers, or those lots are going to sit empty. So I think we have enough smart people in this town that we can come up with a parking solution. But that's just one component of it.
Yeah. No, exactly. I just was using that as an example. It's just some things to think about as you're discussing. Because I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve here. I think we all agree on that.
Right.
It's just a matter of concentrating it so that it's across the board change. It's not just the pizza's here.
I always turn it off.
I think you get my point there.
Yeah, I do. But I think we can have a housing component involved in this too. I think we can, you know, it can make sense. You give an extra floor, and maybe part of that is a housing component, so that the people that are developing these lots, it makes sense to them. Their ROI is going to be there.
You know, I think in speaking with a lot of people that are looking at potential development here, there's a lot of wait and see. A lot of people are tying up properties in long due diligence processes just to see what happens, if anything's going to happen. And how does that play into, you know, smaller lots? Because they're looking to see what we're going to do with smaller lots. If you do things with smaller lots that'll allow more, as you said, FAR or density, they're paying attention. And they're going to want to see if they can be part of these pink zones. So these are all considerations. I think that like you said, there's a lot of smart people involved that are talking through this. And I wasn't able to be here, but I was listening and got to hear some of the comments. I like the fact that you guys are organizing to be one voice versus all different voices.
Right. It makes your life easier too, because you come
Streamlines.
You know, we watch the town council meetings, and
Yeah.
the same thing with the LPA. You've got 15 different issues, and what's the most important. But I think small business is important for the island. We have to have goods and services, because I said the other day, you know, after 7 o'clock, you can't get a Band-Aid. You can't get a case of beer. And how are we going to have a season in 2024 where you can't get these basic goods and services after dark? And if we don't get going, I think we're going to have the same issue in 2025. So what's going to happen? You're going to get reviews like, hey, the island's kind of cool during the day, but I feel like I'm in prison at night. And we don't want that. We've got to get our island moving. And I think one of the ways to do that is to create one of these pink zones. And when you have that LDC overlay right there, and let's see what happens. And you know, you said people are afraid of change, but we got to change. And if we don't do it island-wide, let's pick one recovery area where we can see if it works.
I said overchange. You said change.
I love the concept of the pink zone. I'm curious, since we heard it at length on Monday, the various regulatory hurdles that residents face and mom and pops face. I don't want to put you on the spot, town attorney. We just talked about this the other day, but is there ways to scale the CPD process so a large developer who has significant obligations under the CPD process, is there a way to scale it for a small mom and pop so it's less onerous? Is there ways for folks who are coming in for a variance, they technically need 3 or 4 variances, but they're having to pay for 4 variances, whether really the town's only looking at 1? Is there ways for, we heard another example where somebody's rebuilding the exact same fence and the town refuses to give it administrative variance? Are there ways that we can implement this pink zone concept in these areas?
Let me start by saying, don't shoot the messenger. Because one of the problems that I believe every community that experiences the type of event that Fort Myers Beach has gone through faces this issue and these difficulties. But I want to make two comments that I believe are pertinent to the conversation and that need to be considered. One, as it relates to the actual building permit, how can we make that process easier? There's very little that, unfortunately, that we as a municipality can do, because the Florida Building Code, as I've stated repeatedly, is something that the state has adopted. The Florida legislature has said, 2 decades ago, we don't want this individualized building code system that previously existed, where certain things could be done easier here versus there. The conundrum that the developers and the builders would say is, I go across the street and all of a sudden I have 10 additional requirements because I'm in a different jurisdiction literally across the street. So the Florida legislature said everyone has to follow a unified Florida building code. And the Florida Building Commission, an entity created by the state, is tasked with reviewing the Florida Building Code periodically, making updates, and promulgating a new one. I think it's every 6 years. And we have to follow it. And there's a very small provision in the Florida Building Code that gives local municipalities to adopt procedural modifications that have to be reviewed and approved by the Florida Building Commission before we're able to do that. And we don't have the authority to modify any substantive provision. We have to wait for that next cycle to propose changes and go through that process. I've had multiple conversations with many of you, if not all of you, about this issue, with the building official, with the prior interim town manager, obviously with Mr. Hyatt now. And unfortunately, there's little that the town can do to modify those regulations and make it easier. And that's a matter of perception as well as what constitutes easiar.
John, before you move on, I just want to touch on it. I don't think that they're asking to circumvent the Florida Building Code.
John, what we're asking.
Now, the zoning aspect, that's the second point, which I believe that.
Well, before you move on, I want to finish.
Let me clarify this, John. We're not asking to build cheaper. We want to build the code. Everybody wants that. I don't want the liability. We want to build safe structures. What I'm talking about is the permitting process. How can we get it through faster? If you're in a pink zone, maybe go to the head of the line, but maybe have pre-planning meetings.
That's a separate, but really, but at the end of the day, because there's two components to the approval process: the planning, the zoning, and then the building, and so they work together. So you can create a system that may expedite or be easier for the zoning perspective, the side of the equation, but you can't do much with the Florida Building Code. So, and certainly with the number of permits, applications that staff is receiving on a daily basis, there's just sometimes it may be the solution is putting more seats, more butts in the seats to process the applications, because staff is getting a significant number of applications on both sides of this equation, planning as well as the building permit. In working with staff on some of these issues, I know that they're working very diligently to get the permit applications on both sides processed. As it relates to the zoning, the pink zone issue, again, to some degree, don't shoot the messenger, we're constrained by state law. And state law, the growth management statute says that every local government has to have a comprehensive plan. and every government has to have a land development code. And those two documents must be internally consistent. And so in order to be able to create the pink zone, which I think is a great idea conceptually, we most likely will have to amend our comprehensive plan, because our comprehensive plan does not provide for a pink zone zoning district right now. So in order to be able to have that provision in our land development code, we first need to amend our comprehensive plan, which requires us to go to the state, have the state review it, say yes, and then adopt the regulations that would implement that comprehensive plan change. So nothing is impossible, but the state has not made it easy. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize. It's not the town, but it's the regulatory system that currently exists that requires us to do certain things in a certain way before we can actually begin the implementation process. And, that, in the eyes of many, is, gosh, well, it takes too long. But that's how the state law is set forth. And so the red tape that we're talking about in, using a pink zone to cut through that, some of it's not by us, it's by other agencies, including the Florida legislature.
And I appreciate, let me just finish my question. So if, that's the 10,000-foot view, and I appreciate that. But could you just comment on the three specific examples? The refining of the CPD process to have a little bit less onerous for mom and pops. When somebody comes in for a variance and they're technically required 4 variances, they have to pay for four variances. When they just really the town it takes as much time to review 1 as it does 4 to be charged and to go through all that hassle. Somebody who wants to rebuild a fence that already exists and they're building the exact same fence that we don't have the ability to authorize staff to give an administrative variance. I mean, those are the specific examples. Could you comment on those?
Yeah, certainly we can process amendments to the code, and that's been discussed at the LPA level on, I believe, at least 2 separate occasions, is to modify the permitting process, the regulatory process, to give power back to staff to process some of these development applications administratively and not require them to go to either the LPA or ultimately the town council. And my answer to that is, my experience is that's the development pendulum that swings back and forth in virtually every government agency or municipality I've worked for. Let's make it easier now. And then, oh gosh, look how, that it had some unintended consequences. Let's take away that power. That has been the case here in Fort Myers Beach, based upon my inquiry with staff, is that some of these things were previously allowed, invested in staff, and those were taken away. So now we're, revisiting the issue. That is being discussed at the LPA level. That's being discussed at the staff level. And I, ultimately, I think in the next month or so, certainly as part of this conversation and the conversation already has gone on, that it'll be brought before the town council for direction to say, is this what you all want staff to do? We'll then draft the ordinance to give back or vest back in staff some of the authority to process what I would call some of these de minimis approvals. But I'm not aware of anything right now, to some of your examples, that would limit or otherwise prohibit putting back up a fence in the same location. That's a function of just obtaining a building permit.
Let me interject here, because this is something we've been talking about in previous councils before Ian. And the idea that I read on lean urbanism is it's not just it's not just making a pink zone, not just reducing necessary regulations. It's doing some upfront work, coming up with templates that are pre-approved, models, if you will, kind of like a model CPD that would be pre-approved, that if you follow whatever those constraints are, then you would need to go through the CPD process. And the reason why this is implemented is for the small businesses, because like you said, if you have a small lot, you're trying to build a small business, the idea of hiring a planner and an attorney and going through the variance process and the CPD is a significant portion of the cost. It really
It's at
raises
least
the cost.
$100,000. So at least one of the things we can talk about is making it scalable.
Well-
or like you said, have 5 if you
You come up with templates. You come up with,
With
the only
templates.
problem with that is, and this is also, was one of the items on my list is coming up with a schedule to work on the comprehensive plan and work on the LDC to get these updates done and include something like this. Because the only problem with it, though, is if you want to create templates, and first you got to come up with the rules of how you're going to do it, then you have to create the templates. That's all upfront, time-wise. It saves you money in the long run, but it means you're waiting for this process to go through, and you know how slow
right, and
any kind of
that's
government
that's
process
one of our
works.
points. I mean, the T in that equation is huge because a lot of these small businesses, they don't have money coming in. They only have savings for so long. So the longer we wait, they're probably going to end up having to sell their land. But how are they going to sell it unless we have some type of plan or some vision of what these lots are going to look like and what's going to be able to be built on them?
And I think too that another thing that's kind of, I think, muddying the market is like what the valuations really are. Because I think with some of these huge projects that are being proposed, 100 units an acre, in some of these projects, that there's a lot of speculation. I think a lot of people put their lots up for sale thinking that that whoever buys it is going to get this kind of density, and no one's going to do that until they think they're going to get that kind of density.
Right. I think for sure after what John said, when the comprehensive plan does come to us in a couple months, we need to absolutely have to have a variable for a pink zone.
But is it in the comprehensive, my question, is it in the comprehensive plan, or can there be changes made on a short-term basis due to catastrophic conditions in the land development code? And that would be totally separate from the internal process of how our permitting works and how it goes through, and readjusting our permitting department to more streamline things. And that's something, that I think Andy could look at, but I don't think that goes with changing the comp plan.
As I understand the request is to create a, for lack of a better description, as has been described here, a pink zoning overlay district. That's a function of adopting a code, an ordinance saying we're creating a pink zone overlay district, and that is going to cover this area to this area of the city. And if you're in this area, you can do these listed uses, and go through an expedited permitting process. The problem with doing that at the land development code for level is that zoning district is not provided for in our comprehensive plan.
What happens if it's a zoning district that already exists, like the downtown district?
Certainly, we can modify that. That's if it's in the same area or some of those issues. But again, we'd have to stay within the confines of whatever that matching land use district is in our comprehensive plan. So there's land use districts and there's zoning map districts, and they have to be consistent with each other internally. And so if we have an overlay district in an area, that's fine. And we can modify that zoning district regulations to potentially make it easier, but we can't go outside those boundaries of how that's set up currently unless we, again, modify the comprehensive plan to change the district boundaries as well. They have to be internally consistent.
So John, just for clarity, because I think you said something that's different than what she was just alluding to. Using the downtown district, you're saying, I think what you're saying is through the land development code, you can adjust the restrictions or lack thereof in that district specifically. But can you, without changing the comp plan, do a overlay within the district to create the pink zone? I think that's the question.
No,
And
we can't.
there you go.
But we can make, within the existing zoning code, we can potentially make it easier or expand the list of permissible uses within the downtown zoning district.
But that would encompass the entire district, not just a specific pink zone.
Correct. It would be the entire district.
That's what I was trying to do.
Okay, but maybe that's what.
Maybe we're
the starting
looking at
point.
the
Maybe
entire
that's the starting
district.
point.
If that's the direction of the council, we'll use that as a starting point.
But I know, in talking to planners, I've talked to the planners about the same thing. And their thing is it's a top-down approach. You start with the comp plan, and then you make the LDC consistent with the comp plan. We've been working on this comp plan now for well over a year. It seems like we just have to make this a priority for council to get the comp plan reviewed. I don't think there's a lot of really, we were pretty consistent with the LPA and the town council's opinion of the last iteration about, not wanting the huge FARs and all that. So I think that I just would like to really make this priority for our agenda management coming up to say that let's come up with a schedule.
Yeah, because originally, his first presentation, the timeline looked like we'd be able to get it by the end of the year, and I don't see that happening right now unless we light a fire under them.
I think light a fire, and it should be the top thing on our list.
Yep.
Because, I think it's like some other things that we are working on is that, if we're going to rebuild, if you get that in place, it not only makes it easier for everybody, but you save time in the long run because people aren't coming in and taking staff's time and council's time getting CPDs and getting a lot of variances that maybe they wouldn't need if we have a consensus about what that's, what's allowable.
But I also think we could work parallel and be doing the code as well as taking the whole downtown district, because obviously the whole downtown district needs help, and using that as our, we just move forward with that.
Right, that'd be our test case.
Yeah.
If it's already allowed. And, that's something we all have to talk about.
Right. The only concern, and I'm not saying nothing that I haven't said publicly and I haven't said to Scott or anybody else that's listening, when you change an entire district, you have to think about what is in that entire district. I'm not opposed to pink zones. I'm not opposed to changing the comp plan to potentially put it in depending on how it works out. But that, as we said, that takes time. But I think what they're trying to do is figure out a way to do it. And if you change an entire district, you change it for the entire district. So it's not just property A, it's property that's on the back bay by the water. So if you go to an FAR of 5, which was proposed within, that's for that entire district. So if there is a big player that can accumulate several properties, you have to understand that they are getting the same thing that you're giving them.
One of the things, though, Dan, with the pink zone is you could probably put a poison pill in there. And this would be a question for John, where you can't accumulate. Can you do that, John?
Limiting how much
Or is that-
property one can acquire is
Property rights?
disfavored under Florida law.
But could you do something with whatever these new rules would be, saying that it's 4 lots under a certain size, or projects under a certain size?
Conceivably. Again, not to belabor the point, but whatever changes we are potentially discussing or ultimately do to make it easier with respect to the, or expand the allowable uses, or whatever we can do, as we're discussing here in the downtown district, still has to be consistent with whatever language is in our current comprehensive plan as to what that says. Again, and I'm paraphrasing, zoning, land use district designations generally read, the purpose of this district is to provide for development incentives for the downtown district in Fort Myers Beach, which is defined as from here to here. Could be simply as that. If it's that generic, then, within the zoning code, we can do pretty much a lot of the things that we're talking about. If it's very specific, if conversely, if the language in the comprehensive plan says it's to provide incentives and to allow these 15 uses, then the only uses that are allowed are those 15. So nothing is impossible, but it's the devil's in the details. And I really think that part of that answer is community development staff providing that information. I would suggest that the task here this morning, if you all aren't so inclined, is to direct staff through the manager to prepare an analysis to help guide you. We'll try and bring it forward as soon as possible, and at the same time, to kind of tell you what's there, what can be done now, what can't be done now, and then move forward with your direction, which is I'm hearing you is to see if we can make the downtown district easier to implement and use it kind of as a test for this peak zone concept.
Yeah, I would think that let's put it on the planner's plate. Now we have July, for them to come back in August with at least a plan moving forward about how to implement it. And I don't want to focus just necessarily on the downtown district, because we also have the CB zoning, where those lots are sitting vacant too, and they're out among the, you know, residential neighborhoods. So, you know, I mean, in some ways, the downtown district is a little ahead, because there's already allowable uses and things that you don't get in other places. You know, setbacks, that kind of stuff. But I think, to me, I think for our agenda management, I'd like to see the staff come back with a plan for our first meeting in August, and we can start expediting this.
Absolutely. In another, I'm assuming you guys have thought about it, since we're talking specifically right now about commercial properties. We are just 50% of the permit bearers when it comes to commercial properties. The fire district is also one. So I
Right.
think as you guys continue your conversations, it's important to include them in what their
Absolutely.
restrictions are going to be, or what they're willing to potentially look at making
Yes.
changes on, to be able, because we can issue a permit all day long, but if they aren't issuing a permit, you're still right where you were.
Right, yeah, you're half of the equation. We definitely want to bring them in, and I think Fire Chief was at our meeting.
Yeah, he was.
So that's, you know, we extend the invitation to him, but absolutely, he's going to be a big part of it.
Now, the other part about this, John, now, with this entity, this Let's Go entity, it seems to me this is really better driven by the LPA than an outside entity, since we're dealing with staff and,
Well, we just wanted to bring it to your attention, and let's,
Yeah.
again, let's get the ball rolling. I mean, we can give you feedback and guidance, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the LPA and the town staff and town council that are going to come up with this. But I totally agree.
I think, Andy, have you kind of picked out what Councilor Veach has pointed out? It only takes two to get it on there, and I'm with you. I think we need to have Eddie and his group back here at the first meeting on Monday with a plan in place. I think we gave them enough information at the last time he was here. He's had enough time to put things together, I would hope,
Yeah, I
based
would
on
hope
our
so, too.
conversation. And if he does not, or he can't make that, potentially we should start looking at finding a group that can.
Amen. All right, well, thank you all very, very much for your time.
Well, I've got, at the meeting, it was requested a council member and a staff advisor person. Is that something you're still looking at wanting, or?
Yes, absolutely.
And how will then we proceed with that, John?
As I stated, when this issue first came up, I think there are some significant sunshine issues that come into play. The fact that I believe Scott, as well as I think one other member of the group, may also be members of the LPA.
Patrick, yes.
That creates sunshine law issues that we need to have to work through. But ultimately, it is up to town council whether or not you wish to, again, designate a town council liaison and a staff liaison to work with this organization as you do with some of your other advisory committees.
John, even if they were an ad hoc committee, wouldn't there still be potential sunshine issues?
Yes, sir.
Unless they had a publicly addressed meeting?
That is correct.
Is that something you guys are planning on doing, is doing like they do for the LPA and the council meetings, publicly notifying a meeting if you and Patrick, even through an ad hoc committee, are going to be on the same committee?
Our plan right now is we're planning to have another meeting in July, and we're going to publicly notify it. Yes. Now I don't know what the statutes for what subcommittees and all that. I don't know what the rules are. We could use some guidance.
Yeah, and the bottom line is that if you are, any of you, this applies to the LPA as well as to the town council, if two members of either body are present and there is a discussion of an item that is likely to come before your respective bodies, the LPA and the town council, then that meeting has to be publicly noticed. Minutes of the meeting must be kept, and the general public must be allowed to attend the meeting. And otherwise, you're not complying with the sunshine law.
Well, we want to comply.
Just for the record, I did ask the clerk for Monday's meeting to have it publicly noticed, and she did so. So So all of
Yes,
us were
yeah,
there, so
yes.
we're off to a good start.
Yeah, correct. So, you know, there are issues with, you know, in the context of it's an ad hoc or not, that there are two LPA members, because it's very foreseeable that the discussions that take place within this group are likely to come before the LPA at some point, because that would be the logical next step in the process. So it's an issue for Scott and for Patrick to be aware of and to take the appropriate steps to.
Yeah, we may have to do that. I mean, we want to follow the sunshine laws. All our meetings are going to be public. I mean, it's publicly notified, but if there's on the back end with Patrick and I being on separate committees and that's going to raise an issue, then one of us is just going to have to step down from one of those committees. So.
And it's not just being a member of the committee, but it's actually being present and participating in the conversation.
That's correct.
And that's the issue. You know, because any of you all can go to a meeting that's not necessarily notice the Kiwanis or whatever, and something may come up. It's at that point in time where the self-discipline, for lack of a better description, kicks in. That, you know, one or more of you may have to leave that meeting because one of you is going to speak to the issue, and that's where the sunshine law gets implicated, because you're now hearing what the other person is thinking about how he or she may vote or talk, or their views on the item when it comes before the LPA or the town council.
So John, in order for the ad, is it something we have to vote on as a council? Is that something that has to be an agenda item?
To the extent of appointing a liaison?
Yeah.
Yes, we will, if it's the direction during the course of today's meeting that to move forward with that, it'll be placed on the next agenda for action.
I'd support that being done.
I support that.
I consent to that.
Sounds like you got there.
Well, one thing that kind of comes to me is, we have lots of advisory committees, and I know that, as soon as a committee becomes a town advisory committee, it slows down. And part of the reason why is the chilling effect of the sunshine law and the meeting schedule. But it seems like an ad hoc committee, typically a committee we'd make an ordinance, say what the responsibility of that committee is, what's their mission, and we make appointments, and then everybody is educated on the sunshine law. There's a certain process that goes through. Now the question is this better to be a bona fide town committee? We have a rebuild committee as opposed to an outside committee. I was just thinking about from kind of keeping things clean.
Again, historically, the appointment of liaisons, both at the council level and at the staff level, have been limited to advisory committees established by the town council. There have been, as I understand, some outliers where, one or more of you have volunteered to, I'll go to those meetings and I'll report back type of situation. So it's within your discretion as how you wish to move forward. But again, repeat myself, historically, appointment of liaisons has been limited to town advisory committees that are established by the town council.
That's fair enough. Whatever you guys think's best and whatever, clears up the red tape. I mean, as Becky had stated, we want to be one voice so we can get you guys focused and the town manager focused and really drill down what the issues are. And it's not just, it's just not small lots. It's infrastructure. It's livability. It's residents. So, I mean, it's a complete package of recovery. I just want to bring this before you just to get the ball rolling because we think this is the biggest component of it. I mean, again, we need goods and services on the island. We need small businesses back. And we need this money to stay on this island, not leave the island.
Well, I think that the ad hoc committee that Vice Mayor Adderholt was on for the school board seemed to work out really good. That wasn't a town actual committee. That was just we kind of gave consensus that you want to be the liaison for the council. Is that
that's the outlier that I was mentioning before that I'm familiar with is where you did that. So we will put we'll put it on as an agenda item for the next meeting, and you all take action, give us the direction, and we'll do so.
I certainly feel that that's the shortest
Yeah.
distance between two
I want to do
points.
it the most expeditiously and legally correct.
Anything else you need from us?
No, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Anybody-
you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody, looks
See
like
you
you
in
got
July.
another.
I think one other community we should also look at too is the Times Square downtown redevelopment part of it. As you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, that we don't know what Times Square is going to look like. So I think as we start with the pink zone, working forward, we should also try to create a subcommittee that will look into what Times Square will look like, because it's a joint partnership between the town, the business owners, and Lee County. Now, saying that we don't know what's going to look like is correct, but if we go back to Spinskowski plans back in 2000 for the downtown going into Times Square, we have some ideas of what he was thinking about and some plans that was approved by the previous council back in 2000 that we can expand on. So I think, we need to start putting our group together also, and start getting to work on that so we can have some recommendation with staff for your August meeting. And we will also need a liaison from the council. But again, it will be two separate agendas. Everything will be noticed, and we'll start with the town staff and then move forward to Lee County.
You're talking specifically separate from the Let's Go FMB?
No, we are part of FMB.
Okay.
But we have different areas that we need to work on.
Right.
One is the pink zone, recovery zone. One is recreating Times Square. Times Square is a component of three people. It's three organizations: the business owners, the town, and the county. The town had already come up with plans to redesign Times Square, how we were going to reset everything and rebuild it. So we can work off of those plans that we already have. We can work off the Spinskowski plans that was already developed for the downtown area. And we are working as a private business group to create what it'll look like. But at the same time, we need to start getting inputs. We don't want to just come up with a plan and say, here, Mr. Mayor, here's the plan. We want the plan to be inclusive.
Okay.
So,
I think it maybe would be certainly logistically simpler if you could do all this from one committee instead of.
Yeah, I agree.
no,
Separate
we're
committees.
one committee, but we have so much work to do. Scott is leading the recovery portion of it. We also have another subcommittee that's leading the rebuild of the pier. And we have a group that's working directly with Times Square. I mean, as you know, time is limited and we're in a time crunch. So it's all one committee. We're not apart. It's all one voice. And as they said, the biggest thing that came out of that voice from our meeting was we want to see Times Square downtown rebuilt. So we have to separate to achieve the goals we need to achieve.
I guess I'm still a little confused. So are
Yeah.
you asking for a separate Let's Go FMB group?
No.
Or a branch off of this, so then we only would need one?
We're asking for a branch off of it.
Well, that's between you guys.
Hi, yeah, hi. Sorry, we're still, We're-
Hold on. For the
I
record,
just-
please state your
Hi,
name,
my
both
name's
of you, because
Beverly
I don't think
Milligan.
Mr. Prasad stated his name
Right.
before
I
he started speaking.
apologize. My
Terry
name's
first.
Beverly
Have Terry say his name first since he was speaking.
Terry Prasad, Times Square.
Hi, Beverly Milligan. I just want to say that thank you very much for everything that you've done today, and we really, really appreciate it. Times Square, as you know, as Becky mentioned earlier, was at the top priority of the 6 issues that we put on the form that was selected. So that's going to be a priority for us, and we will report back to you through the infrastructure that we've set up, and we continue to build. We got such a outstandingly large response last week. Over 50% of the people wanted to be volunteers. So we're just trying to manage that unbelievable response. And so I think that's where the confusion and the communication is. We're on it. We appreciate and thank you very much for everything that you've done for us today. And we look forward to working with you.
So that's where we're at. So, we're
Okay.
looking for for some assistance on it.
We'll see you in August.
Thanks, Terry.
Next, we've got public communications plan development.
As Jenny starts her way up here, right after I got here, obviously communication's key with any organization, especially an organization like we have. We found out, that a little miscommunication yesterday that can create some issues. And so what we want to do is formulate a plan that's driven by you, actually, how you want to handle it, how you want to see things done. So we have a policy put in place going forward that just works and that we can lean on, that everybody can follow up on. And I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. So Andy just did the why of why we want to do this plan.
Jenny, what's your name?
Oh, sorry. Jenny Dexter, Communications Coordinator, AKA PIO for the town of Fort Myers Beach. And so Andy just went through kind of the why we want to do this. Also, as you guys all know, I don't have to tell you, Ian kind of shifted our focus for communications and upped the ante big time. Also, we have some new council members. We have a new town manager. It's been 3 years since this position was filled. So it's just a good time to review and refresh. And it's going to help us all get organized and put timelines to the many expectations that we have. So just the plan creation process real quick. We're talking today about, I want to get your input on some things to help us get going with the plan creation. And then on August 10th, I'll come back with the draft. In between then and now, we'll be doing a digital stakeholder survey in addition to meeting individually with key stakeholders that you guys have all helped me figure out a list for. So I appreciate that. And after August 10th review, I'll work on the draft or the final of the plan, and I'll come back September and October with the plan final. It looks like the September meetings are mostly budget, so we may have to go into October before I can come back and you guys can say, yeah, that looks good, or yeah, we need more changes. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what our current communications objective is, and this is what we're operating off of on a daily basis. So we're constantly trying to put out timely, relevant, accurate public information. We have a variety of communication tools and tactics that we're using, and our goals are to demonstrate the town's ongoing recovery from Hurricane Ian and promote town services and the actions and the work of you all. Our audiences primarily are full-time residents, seasonal residents, property owners, and business owners, and we have secondary audiences that you can see there too. The tools that we use, just to go through real quick, because I don't think we've ever talked about this as a group, are the website. We have system administrators, 3 or 4 of us, and then we have content editors from each department. Something that we've done recently to kind of beef up the website is we've added the report a concern button that's always been on the site, but we've added it at the top, and we've really gone through who those emails are going to and how we're reporting the tracking that we're doing on those issues that are coming up. We have a system on the website where we can send out texts and emails, and we're pretty much doing this daily. We had about 600 subscribers before the hurricane, and we now have 2,500 subscribers. And we're constantly asking people to sign up for this because this is the best way you're going to get the most up-to-date information. We do social media posts, obviously, about 15 a week, and we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. And we have 25,000 followers and fans over all of our platforms.
Jenny?
Yes.
I'm going to stop you because I think it's such an important piece of this puzzle. You send out alerts to people,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yeah.
And you also have a newsletter.
Yes.
And they're 2 separate things?
Yes.
So in real lay terms, if for anyone who might be watching, and we have pretty good numbers watching these days, could you help people, could you just walk them through step by step how they can sign up for that
Sure.
procedurally?
Mm-hmm. So if you go to the homepage of the website, which is www.fmbgov.com is the easiest address, and scroll down to a box that says popular pages.
Is it a sandal or a box?
It's a box.
Okay.
It says popular pages. You have to scroll down to the bottom. There's a header in that box that says sign up for news and information. And just click that, and you can go to the form that's going to pop up and say you want to receive texts and emails, or just texts. And there's a whole list of things that you can say that you want information about, including bids, including our newsletter, FM Beach News, which comes out once a week digitally, including information from the town clerk on meetings. Or right after Ian, and since we were averaging 5+ a day media interviews or information requests, not including public records requests. So we averaged about 4 press releases a month. During Ian, that was a lot more than that, but right now we're about at 4. And we did, in our emergency plan, which is a separate plan from what I'm talking to you about today, we did beef up our Code Red administration. It did not work well during the hurricane. It was under a different department, and so since the hurricane, Jason's worked really hard, Jason Freeman, to get our administration working great with that, and we've got several backups to backups on that system so that we can all make sure that it works right when we need it in an emergency. And so there's been 2 water main breaks that we've tested out our new system on, our new internal process. And we tested it widespread in May. And that was a test
Jenny,
of all the 17,000 subscribers. So.
if I may, Mayor, the radio station, if you would offer what we've found out about the radio station.
From WGCU, when Jason and I went. So last week, Jason and I went to WGCU to a seminar that WGCU was holding for media people, like public relations people like me, communications people, and emergency management people. And they have, which we didn't know during the hurricane, a Florida Public Network connection. And that radio station at FGCU did not lose any power, any internet, any connections at all. And they broadcast through the entire state of Florida throughout the hurricane, or in the aftermath of the hurricane. I think 1 or 2 of you guys did an interview. I also did an interview with them after the hurricane. But we know that radio was the only media outlet, that stayed up and going after the hurricane. The local television stations were not even operating. They were coming to WGCU to do their sessions, or they were operating on their radio stations if they had one. So we realized it's really important that we're prepared for the next emergency, that we're using radio. And so we've built this relationship now with WGCU, that we will be working with them, in addition to Beach Talk Radio, obviously, to get our message out to people using the radio network. So also during the hurricane, Facebook was one of the only social media outlets that didn't go down either, as long as we had power and internet. We had to go off-site to be able to use it, but it wasn't, it was operating when other things weren't. So you have something you want to say, I can tell.
I do, because every time I hear that, it makes me cringe that we didn't have power or accessible internet. To me, that is completely unacceptable. There's no reason we shouldn't have had power or internet, so we cannot have that ever happen again. Everybody else that was affected by the storm had no problem getting communication out. So having no power and no internet should be the very last excuse we ever use again. My
Okay,
opinion.
now explain that more to me. I don't think I understand what you're saying.
By saying we don't have internet, we don't have power, that's just an excuse. If you had to drive to Collier County, or if you had to drive to the middle of the state, I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying
Yeah, no, I understand
the direction should have been get to wherever you need to get to make sure we can get out as much information as possible. And we live in an area, a time frame where solar power is very, very prominent. There's no reason we should never have power, is my point, or communication with the outside world. That's just completely unacceptable, and it can't happen again. And I'm not directing it at you. I'm just directing
No, I
it at Jen.
understand. Well, and that's one good thing about what we learned at WGCU is they have a whole studio. We would be able to go there and have press conferences if the need arose. We can also go to the EOC and have press conferences if the need arises. And also, since I was in the EOC for the first 3-4 days after the storm, I know we can also use their power and internet when we need to. We were driving to the Red Sox Stadium and downtown Fort Myers administration. So we were getting things out on Facebook is my point. It's just, yeah, everything else was pretty much tanked, so. And so we do some publications. The annual water quality report is something that has to be done, and it's been farmed out until this year, and so now we're bringing that back in-house. It was pretty expensive being farmed out, so. And these are just some other things that we do. I'd really like to see us have a presence at community events with our own tent and our own information and our own person there just to answer questions, be present in the community, so forth. We do some videos. I'd like to see us be doing more speaking engagements. We take pictures constantly all day long. And we have an info board at Town Hall for people who are waiting in the lobby that they can read all the information we have on every other outlet. And then we have an emergency plan that's separate from this. Okay, that's odd. Well, there it goes. So we have some topics that we really, really focus on, and right now Bay Oaks and Mound House are hot and heavy, and we're loving that, being able to push out their content. Community activities and events with vetted organizations. I'm constantly pushing out information from the Chamber, the Women's Club, the Community Fund, Beach Talk Radio, Kiwanis and Lions, and the emphasis there is on vetted. They really need to be a nonprofit or somebody that's really, really well-known in the community.
Just topically, so the group, the Let's Go group, would they be considered vetted?
Absolutely.
Because
We
they're-
need to add them to that list now, I think so. And any council actions and the discussions that are pertinent, and obviously rebuilding after Ian is hot and heavy, so. So, here's the point where I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I appreciate what you've already provided. Kind of tell me what's working, what's not working. If you had 3 wishes, 1 wish, 2 wish, what would you like to see us be doing communications-wise? And any other direction you want to provide.
I'd be happy to start. I come from a communications background, and often there's no communications in the industry. But when I got on a condo board, when I moved here, there was no communication there was whatsoever, and it was very secretive. And that's a hot button with me. So as a board secretary, I always put out more information than it was absolutely necessary. Always signed my name to it as well, and gave a contact. I think communication is one of the easiest, but it's one of the most important things we can do. And we had a colossal failure yesterday. And this is the basics. And if we can't do the basics, then this is all just pie in the sky for me. But I think we need to definitely add to our social media the meetings that we're going to be holding. It's imperative that people know and understand where we are, what we're doing, and how they can listen in, if not attend. So I think that's a start. After that, I've given you the Condo Association of Fort Myers Beach contact. I don't know if you've reached out yet or not. I think that's a good place also to get feedback from and keep them in the loop too.
I think we need to, the data seems to be available, but we have to format it in a way where we basically have a dashboard on our website where the public can check in and see, oh, demolition permits are, you're getting through within 7 days or whatever. These permits are taking longer. These permits we've actually processed 5,000 permits. There's 1,000 waiting to be processed. Very simple, but real numbers, honest numbers, so people can see how the process is going, full transparency, and then coupled with that, and I tried to do this a little bit with this Key Questions show when I would have Steve and his team on. I'd like to see some short videos in the permitting process, kind of how-to videos, particularly the most common ones, and also the ones that we're having the most trouble with in terms of success rate, in terms of people filling them out. I'd love to see a kind of a how-to video, because the biggest mystery in communication, and particularly in a regulatory entity like a town, is what does the town want? What are they looking for in these questions. Maybe some examples of great answers that sail through, some examples of what specifically, that this is very new to a lot of people as they fill out these forms. Yep, and we even have contractors who, it's a little different with all the FEMA and all the post-E and stuff. Just help people, have the town staff, you could do these in 5-minute videos, each form. What are these cost forms? How do you like them in the columns? What are you looking for? What are the numbers? What do you see the most common mistakes that are being made so we can avoid all that? People love to, whenever they've got a plumbing problem, they'll Google YouTube, how to fix a pipe, how to do this. I mean, if we could do that for our permitting process, I think that would be wonderful. It's technical in nature, but I think that's an important, the permitting piece, as we've heard again today, one of our biggest challenges, and in the frequently asked questions are great. There's great, I tell everybody who has got a permitting challenge, read those frequently asked questions. But on the forms themselves, some of the questions, I mean, folks who live in this world, and it's not as complex, but for anyone who's outside that world, and I put myself in that category, these forms can be very complex, and common mistakes are made that could be avoided if people could just have a little how-to video for each one of these key forms. Number two, and I went into a whole spiel on this at a previous meeting, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I'd love to see a cleanup program from the town. This is really more of a policy issue than a communications issue, but I think it's important that we communicate it, that we're going into each section of our neighborhood by neighborhood. We're sweeping off Estero, we're trimming the weeds, we're cleaning up the streets, we've got our street sweeper working, we've got signage on it, we've got the public works staff, we've got the base staff, we've got the ambassadors, we've got the whole, and people from who could, not from permitting, maybe one person from permitting in case there's somebody in the neighborhood who wants to come out with some question, and I understand from some of the town staff there's liability issues in terms of having the public volunteer. We can work with our attorney, work through some of those issues, but at a minimum, the town's going through section to section where everyone can see that we're trying to clean up the town while we go through this challenging process. It won't be perfect, but I think it's important that we communicate that to the public. Number three, I want to manage the overall message. To me, the message is we're all in this together. There's been a perception in the past that the town has this adversarial, from an enforcement standpoint, from a customer service standpoint, it's not always fair, but there's this adversarial relationship as opposed to the town partnering with our residents. Now, there's always going to be somebody that's going to bend the rules, and we obviously need to enforce our rules. But the goal is to bring people into compliance. And anytime we're finding somebody, generally where we failed somewhere in the education process, the communication process, the enforcement process, again, certainly exceptions to that. But this concept of when it's a servant leadership concept where we work for the public, not the other way around, and I want to make sure that message gets out and look for examples where the town has helped someone and where they've made an impact in somebody's life and they've served the public. And let's message that in a real way, and that to me is our overall message, particularly post-Ian, that we are all in this together. We're working together to get people back in their homes, to get people back in their businesses. And I think that should be a common thing for our messaging strategy. That's all I've got. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor, if I may,
Yep.
I'm sorry, if I may, there was prior instruction from the town council prior to Mr. Hyatt coming on board to create that dashboard that you're talking about. So if I might have Jenny go through it, this is our webpage. The town's webpage, anyone can access through the internet, and this is at the bottom of the town's webpage. Can you go up for a moment?
That is the up.
Oh, that is, okay, so on mine, it shows at the bottom. So we did put, and I'm, I want to make sure, because the goal here is to make the system as easy as possible to use and to provide the information that all of you want on that webpage. These shells pop up at the top once the page fully populates. And if you click on the permitting, and we can certainly, over, permitting, there you go. And we can move that shell to the top, or the first one. This is what comes up. Can we go down? Scroll down. So, there's, how you apply, there's the frequently asked questions. There's actually further down, a link for people to check the status of their own particular application, of a permit application. I think that the only thing that this website, that this link has, and it's got its own link, it may not have is the total number of permits, what's been rejected because of insufficiency and how many have been issued. If that's the direction, that can be added, but for the most part, I think that the issues that that have been discussed about what should be on available to the public, we have there. If not, what is it that we need to add so we meet your expectations?
Yep, fair question. My expectation is aside from the training videos, and the mayor did a nice job the other day on his Monday with the Mayor show of providing some data, but I'd love to see it on the website. I'd love to see it in a dashboard setting where we can measure success. What you hear, John, on the island is that and it's a lot of it's Coconut Telegraph, but you hear that we're months behind on permits. It's a 2-month wait. It's a 1-month wait. They're overwhelmed. Nothing's getting through. Nothing's happening. They're broad generalizations.
Anecdotal.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say anecdotal. But
Anecdotal. Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's all fair, but shame on us. We have to tell our story.
Yeah.
And we have to do it in a way that's easy to see and transparent to the public. So that's you see a lot of governments will metric and measure success. Every department is measured. They measure all of their goals and outcomes. And there's a red zone, there's a yellow zone, and there's a green zone for success. They're ahead. They're caught up. They're expected to turn around within a week. All of their metrics are in green. Everything's great. All of a sudden, maybe somebody was on vacation or somebody was sick. They're in the yellow zone. Town manager's aware, public's aware. They have a little bit of challenge. Red zone. Gosh, we need to triage this with additional resources. There's ways to measure government to measure success.
To that point, again, so we can be very responsive to the council and the public's questions or concerns. Is it, total number of permits, total applications received, total number of permits issued, total number of permits rejected, and then subsequently issued upon revisions, and total number of permits rejected, no resubmissions. And I'm just talking out loud what generally the categories might be.
Fair question.
And then how do you quantify what's the acceptable level?
I think that's where the town staff comes up with some metrics, and the town manager that the public can easily get their head around and see and measure. I don't have the exact answer to that question, John, because I know there are a lot of different categories of permits. Some are moving quicker than others, but maybe we have to categorize it. Maybe we have to break it down. I just think some kind of a formal communication where people can see when somebody says to me, oh gosh, I understand there's 2-month backlog. I said, well, no, go on the website. Here's where you can see what the backlog is. Here you can see how many they've actually already processed. Here you can see what was done last year pre-hurricane. Here you can see the volume that we're seeing. And here you can see there are actually a lot of these getting through. But we have to tell the story, I guess, is what I'm wrestling with.
Well, let me just interject, because this is something I talked to staff about a while ago, was about these kind of metrics. And what they told me is the software we're currently using makes it cumbersome, that it's a manual process. So there's not an easy way just to write some kind of command and say, give me the status of different permit categories. And that's something we talked about a while ago in council about authorizing the town manager to look for different software packages that may provide that kind of functionality where it's currently lacking. And one thing, I agree, I like the idea of having open, visible metrics about how the permitting process is doing, both for squashing the Coconut Telegraph, but we also don't want it to be a real cumbersome thing that slows down staff from actually doing the permitting.
As a interim, though, aren't we extrapolating that data and sending it to us anyway? And couldn't we, as an interim, publish that to give at least a base to start until we can get something in line that you're asking for, Jim?
I'm open to anything that helps with transparency on how the permit process is going. I'm not indicting the permitting process. I'm
I
just
didn't
saying.
think you were.
Yeah, we just need to tell our story a little better on how things are flowing and where the log jams are, and how people can, so people can get a better sense of where we are and how we're doing in this process.
You know, I'll interject a little bit here. You know, I've been working with Amy quite a bit, and we're going to try to monthly update how many permits came in. This is what the rejections were saying. This is what we saw, so that you can. I think more people are worried about learning what the proper process is. You know, I'm looking at this now, and I've said it for a while. Sometimes I think we get very stale on our messaging when it comes to getting information out. It seems like we're waiting for someone else to send out a press release before, and then we're just copy and pasting. Anybody can copy and paste. How do you stay ahead of the issue? The issue people have with permitting is where it's at in the process. I'm all about one-click stop. There's no reason if I'm a builder, or if I'm a general contractor, or if I'm a homeowner, the very first thing, especially now, the very first thing to me I should be able to see is a box where I can type in my permit number and see where it's at. I shouldn't have to go to this button, to this button, to this button to put in that permit number. And I don't see it on the homepage anywhere where I can enter a permit number and it takes you right to it.
I believe it's there.
It
is
should be on the side.
On the side where?
Bar.
And then it's got to link you to the iWork.
This is my point. So I've got to go to the homepage, click on the permit search, then it comes up. Why should I have to do it twice? And I know it's a small, simple thing, but people complain about the permitting because their neighbors are complaining about it. Just like a demo permit. I talked to Steve about this in the past. Right after the hurricane, to get a demo permit, you had to click on 3 separate links to be able to get the form in. So what was happening is you would send in your first form not knowing there's a second and third form. All it took was combining those 3 forms into one PDF. So when I clicked on building permit, everything I needed, so when I submitted it once, it went in. I think a lot of energy should be spent there. Every permit we have should be a one-click link. If it has to have the NOC, if it has to have the owner qualifier, all of that stuff should be one click. This is what you want. If it's a window permit, here's the click. If it's a roofing permit, here's everything you need with one click. If it's a remodel, everything's here with one click. And in that should be an information that says, if you don't know how to do it, here's how you do it. Here's where you have to go to get your NOC. Here's what's required on the NOC. If you don't know, then you can call or you can do whatever. It's just, to me, it seems like a hot mess trying to go around and find some of the things in here. And we're always seem to be behind a little bit. Permitting is just one issue of it.
One idea, that I know that there is an opportunity to log in, right, to have an account with the page. And that if we can customize that so when you log in as your account, then on the front page comes everything that you're dealing with. So you, in your account, you would say, this is my property, or these are my properties. And so when you would log on, then that information that pertains to you would be immediately available. And it'd also be useful to a contractor who has a lot of different properties. Because if they log on, then maybe all the properties they have, status comes up right away.
There are also several systems out there. One that works with Civic Plus. It's a Civic Plus system that will take care of reporting. That will take care of what you're talking about. It just requires time and money to do it. And it's pretty inexpensive compared to some of the other third-party vendors that might be. But that is one thing I want to recommend in the communication plan is that we get something that works for reporting, and easy reporting. It would have the dashboard already on it, so people could see real time. What permits have been submitted and what permits are being issued and that kind of thing.
And I don't know, and this is what my OCD kicks in on this. I've gotten to learn so much about this iWork system that I can see how it's frustrating for someone that doesn't deal with it every day. I'm checking permits, numbers for people quite often throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
Why in the world are things not in chronological order? You'll look on, and I just clicked on the first one. This one shows the dates are all over. You could see when it was reported. It's hard to tell where it is in the status. This is just the first one. But any of them. I mean, you pick one, anyone, doesn't matter. When you click on it, it'll say where I'm noticing there's issues is, especially in commercial, when it has to go to the fire district. it'll say it's in fire review, but when you look at it, it says there's two dates. There's a completed date and then there's another date. And it gets very difficult sometimes to understand that unless you go all the way to the bottom and you see rejection letter, then you can click on that and see what the rejection was. And then you have to go back, at the top it'll tell you waiting for resubmittal sometimes, or it'll say in review. But then when you go down, what's it in review for? Is it in review for flood? Is it in review? It's very difficult to disseminate all that information. I don't know if through iWorks, if there's a way that, and I'll be happy to sit down with any staff member, because I try to think about things from a person's point of view that doesn't understand what they're looking at. I've looked at it enough, I understand it, but it still gets convoluted so much that it's very hard, because most people that have hired a contractor, they're trying to stay on top of it because the contractor has told them the town or the fire district is holding us up, when in fact we're just waiting for a resubmittal from that contractor, and it's been 3 weeks, they haven't resubmitted it. So they're having to call us or send an email to me or send an email to staff and say, why are you holding up my permit? My contractor's saying you're holding up my permit. Well, no, it's just waiting to be resubmitted, and here's a rejection letter that they didn't know anything about or how to find it. So I think it's an information thing that I'll be happy to do a tutorial and say, this is how you find it, here's what you click on it, here's what it tells you. I'll be happy to do it because I've done it enough now. I think I could do it with my eyes closed, but it just needs to be easier.
It's clunky.
Because when it's not
Clunky.
easier, that's when you get this neighbor talking to that neighbor who talks to that neighbor who then posts it on their social media site, and then it goes, I just got an email this morning about someone that has been listening and following along, put their permit in, and they got their permit in 11 days, a reconstruction permit. So they didn't have an issue. So we have good stories with bad stories. Anything we can do, specifically since we're talking about permitting, to make the end user's job that much easier. If it means more staff time I'm there, I'll do it.
I would watch the video from the mayor that said how to check on the status of your permit and have you walk somebody through. I think that'd be very helpful.
I got a note here that I'm gonna start doing videos of, here's this form, here's how you fill it out, don't forget to do this, here's where you have to go. That way somebody can easily see it and do it, because it's very cumbersome on the iWorks site to be able to do it. And this is no fault of anybody else's, it's a software issue.
Right.
But I think that's something, if we have to invest money in, especially from the permitting funds, that's something that we should really, really look into.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll get off my soapbox.
We do need to keep in mind that the website can only do so much.
This is a wish list. You asked for the wish list.
And I'm glad. It gives me a chance to say too, that the website, the way it's set up now, it's not set up to do what we need to have done on the permitting communication part. That's just all there is to it, because we've got third-party vendors and that that we've just linked to on our website, and so we need to make the website very comprehensive and useful for all the different systems that the town provides, or the services that the town provides.
Well, keeping that in mind then, is there some way we can move that to the information that the vice mayor is asking to move to a daily post on Facebook, which seems to be where more people are going anyway, right?
We have a lot signed up on our news module too on the website. So yeah, but we do all of that promotion at the same time, social media to text and email.
One thing I've done in towns, cities I've been in, performance measures. And the thing that a lot of small cities don't do is that, because there's a staffing levels. But I think we've got a unique opportunity here to do that. And I usually use that at the budgeting process and also with the evaluation process. Evaluate staff, and we have tiers and things like that. And it's a whole system that I haven't had the opportunity to start implementing, but I'm there, and that is easily transferred over to provide information anywhere, because it's a public document we produce. We make it part of the budget. What are our goals for the year? Our goals here right now are a lot different than they were 2 years ago. And it'll change again 2 years from now or a year from now. So it's a living, breathing document that we do, but it's also part of the communication plan. And Vice Mayor, you hit straight on it, and I know each one of you would love to see those numbers for everything we do, not just for permitting, for paving and,
Everything
you
should be
know.
measured, yeah. Performance metrics is the answer, but it does take time, and I appreciate that.
Time and resources.
Yep.
So thank you.
I don't
Anything
think-
else?
I don't think we have two more counselors who probably have a wish, who probably have a wish list.
Mayor Ellers, anything else for him?
Well, again, I just want to reiterate that, I think what you're asking about generally, to me, it seems very stale unless something big pops up. We're not being aggressive enough to get information out, even though it's information that may not seem important, whether it's from Jason's department. We had to fix, 35 feet of pipe on Miramar Street today. That's information people want to know, even though it sounds boring. That's information that people want to know, because if they're coming flying in and they can't get down their street on Miramar because we've got the street tore up, even small information like that, it seems like we're just waiting for that big news thing to drop from Lee County or Beach Talk Radio or national news before we're sharing it, or something that we put out through our stuff. Even the little things people want to know, and I just used, because Jason's sitting here, a small little thing, or we finally got the approval to take down Town Hall, or that's kind of a big thing. Even the small stuff, or the county's working on 6 feet of broken sidewalk in front of, Diamond Head or whatever. Just small little things I think that we can continue to get information out. The way that you've covered, I think, every possible social media way that we could get information out. It's the content that we're getting out, I think, is what we need to get a little better at. Trying to be more creative and think outside the box. And people like feel-good stories, but they also want to hear the stuff that's not good. That way they can stay up and understand what. I think it would better help staff from people who are like, well, they're, Public Works isn't doing anything. We haven't seen them working on anything. Well, here's what they did. This week they replaced this much stuff. They did that. I think people want to hear and see that information.
I don't think you can ever go wrong by sharing too much information.
And I think what you do is you control your narrative. If
Yeah.
you don't, somebody else controls it, and then
Nailed
we're
it.
doing damage control to try to right the wrong or correct the misinformation, potentially. I agree. I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and of course, we are, part of this process was to get to that, to, what we all want to see. So thank you. I appreciate the input. And we've got more.
Councilor Woodson?
Yeah, I have a couple. One is media interviews. I know I'm getting tapped all the time by either TV stations or the Observer or whatever, and I'm assuming that everybody else is too.
Nope.
And, some of the thing, there needs to be some kind of standardization protocol, so we kind of all know what we can talk about, what we can't, especially with lawsuits pending and that type of thing. And there's a lot of vocal people in our town that want to copy the world on everything they're talking about, and they copy the media, they copy publications and everything else, and then we get tapped. And we need to know what everybody is saying, what's the right protocol that we can talk about, should that actually go through the town manager and PIO, what is our standardization of how to answer these things. The other thing that I know I've talked with Andy, we talk about it, Bill brought it up at the last meeting. I always talk about our vision, our mission, our values. We need to update what we're looking at, especially our internal code of conduct that could lead to external code of conduct in communications. And we need to get that updated, agreed upon, whatever input is needed, and move forward with that, because we are a different council. We are trying to be a different town and town offices and that type of thing. And I think that's really important to communicate and have a vision on that.
And one thing that we're going to do, August and September are tight, but we're going to try to squeeze in a strategic planning session that's going to include the vision, mission, values, maybe a retreat, get off the island, do that kind of thing. It's perfectly legal to do. We can do those things, and as long as we it'd be open to the public, but we can do that to get away, or we can do it here. It doesn't matter where we do it, but I think it's important for this group to do that. And I think we've got a great opportunity to set a tone as we all continue to hear with everything we do, whether it's a pink zone overlay district or whatever it is, to set the standard for communities that they come here and say, what'd you do after what you went through? That we are that bar that people are measured against. And so some things that I'm impressed to do, and we have plans to move forward with those.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
So I want to just, the idea, and I was writing it down right before the vice mayor said it, but that the idea of a bunch of short instructional clips, and I don't think it necessarily has to all fall on the mayor. Maybe we can divide and conquer, and because there's a lot of topics to cover, and figure out how we're going to allocate things around. And if there is, I think that if the software is keeping us from really presenting these real-time metrics, then I think we need to empower the planning department to suggest different software packages that might work better for that, because I think it is pretty important.
And we're in that process now of trying to identify packages, because sometimes you go out and buy a package, and it works for communications or it works for public work, but it doesn't work for the other 3 departments or 4 departments. So we're trying to create a hybrid and find out exactly. It could be a couple of months before we identify it, but I've tasked the department heads with that very thing. What works, and then they can communicate with each other. And we're trying to identify, because some of these just don't work together. The chronology, I mean, that makes no sense. It should just fall in order. And
Well, that's my question.
simple.
I mean, it's a software. It's got to have flexibility. I would assume there's to a certain point, they're you know what I'm trying to say. To a certain point, they should be able to adjust what they can. And we talked to iWork at all to say these are the things that we want to see that are better. Is this something you can do for us? I don't, the permitting staff is bogged down already. To learn an entirely new system at this time, they'll be able to say, if it's simple and easy to do, then fine. But have we talked to at least iWork or the people that were paying iWork to this is what we would like it to do? Can you do this?
That would be a question for Steve, because it's his team that does that.
You don't have to come up, just yes or no.
I think we need to have him come up.
All right, you went beyond yes or no. Sorry, Steve. Now you got to come up. I tried to give you the yes or no.
Hello, Steve Poposky, Community Development Director. iWork has some limitations. It's I would call it a budget program. We pay very little for it. It does work. It works quite well, quite quickly. There's no technical issues with it as far as it not working. That's more than I can say of a lot of other systems around in different jurisdictions. So from that standpoint, we're very happy with iWork. Now, reporting-wise, there are some serious limitations, and I think you get what you pay for, or at least you hope you do. I don't want to call it any particular jurisdiction, but there are some very expensive programs that don't also have any reporting. Reporting qualities in a permitting system are not, unfortunately, industry-wide are not very good. It's something you have to really hire a specialist to actually program the software to do exactly what you want it to do. And if you want a specific statistic, you're going to have to program that. You're going to bring somebody in specially. The company typically will not be able to do that for you, or just won't.
Well, I think a lot of things could alleviate some of the issues that we're hearing, and obviously ultimately you hear. Mm-hmm. If you know the reason, what are the reasons holding up? To me, the most important part is what's holding up some of these permits. Is it lack of information being put in? Is it they forgot a form? That's to me not so much how many permits are coming in and how many are going out, but what is holding up the ones that are being implemented? Is it because user error? Is it something we're not getting to fast enough? Is it something that, that's the data that I'm more interested in.
Mm-hmm. It's not that we're not getting to it quick enough. I know that's a popular topic, but that's just not the case. And I think what you're trying to do, I would think what you're trying to say is that you'd like to show proof that that we're not holding it up, and it's very difficult to do unless you come in and work with us, which, in any case. it is, I've done multiple videos with Jim, and I think 3 now, about permitting, and we spent hours talking about it. I've put on hundreds of pages of information, you know, beefed up this website to make sure that it has the information that people need, and it does. It really is a great website. I mean, there's a lot to it. You know, you have to click a couple of times to get to different pages, but that's the nature of it. We've tried to make it as simple as possible. We've made a building code and a land development code that's, you know, it's when you stack it up on you know, it's about 2 or 3 feet tall. You know, it's a lot of information. It's a technical process. There's the Florida Building Code and just the regulations. Even land development code is very, and that's true anywhere. Okay, I mean, there's always regulations. So that is usually the issue, is that they apply if, and again, I guess watch the video would be the greatest advice I'd have, but complete the forms, sign everything. You know, all the sort of the obvious things sometimes get overlooked, and you know, we need to actually have those documentation to process. And then when it gets to you know, the repair improvement cost forms, those are important through FEMA and Florida Building Code regulations. We have to get that information. That's absolute requirement by law. A lot of times we don't get that information. People say, well, I didn't spend any amount of money working on my house as far as demolishing. And I said, well, that's a very common complaint, for example. Well, you always are doing something. If you're doing drywall, you took the old drywall down, for example. There's a cost involved. You have to put that on the estimate. So that's an example of something that's very common. That improvement cost form, they don't put anything down for some of these costs, and it's just a matter of filling the form out correctly. So that is what the issue is. It's not the system. It's certainly not the people. People are absolutely gassed at this point. I mean, they're very tired. Worked very hard since the storm. We've had very few people to do the job that we could have had 3 times as many people.
And Steve, I don't want this to seem like it's an attack on the permitting department, because that is not what I'm trying to do personally, and I don't think any of my fellow members are. We're trying to find solutions that are going to make it easier for you. If it's something that we can do to help, if it's something that we can get direct Andy to do to help you, that's what we're trying to do. If it's we need to get someone that sits in there and creates these one-stop form clicks like I was talking about, so that it makes it easier for you. You don't have to keep sending out the email saying, you forgot your NOC, you forgot your qualifying statement, you forgot this. That would help alleviate some of your time and staff's time. So we're just trying to find solutions that are going to make it easier for you and ultimately better for the end user, which is the homeowner, whether they're going through a contractor or they're doing it themselves. So that's what we're trying to get at. If it's through software, we've got plenty of videos, we've got plenty of frequently asked questions, but that doesn't do me any good. And I keep going back to it. If I've got to click on 2 or 3 links to get the right 3 pieces of paperwork to be able to obtain that permit. So it's small little things like that we can maybe clean up to help alleviate what you have to do every day.
I'm confident that our website is simpler and easier to use than any other jurisdiction. I'm willing to say that from what I've seen and what I've experienced. I'm not saying that a higher level can't be achieved. Of course it can. We can always do better, but the issue that's really preventing us from doing that at this point is just we're so busy trying to get permits out the door, and we're doing that you know, you prioritize things. We've been triaging since Ian on a daily basis. We just don't have enough people to do all the different little projects that everybody has. They're all good ideas. I agree. We've done a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, if you want to set up like a little, like sessions to teach community members how to use software, I mean, that's a great idea, but, you know, we just need the people to do it.
Well, a lot of the things that I've heard, sorry, Vice Mayor, a lot of things that I've heard is that people didn't know that there was a rejection letter. And I use that a lot because that's probably the number one thing I hear the most, is they didn't know it was waiting to be resubmitted because they weren't contacted. And if I'm builder A, and on my form I put in contact email is this. Mm-hmm. I assume we're replying to them that this is your rejection letter.
Correct.
Do we have, or should we make sure that there's more than one contact email on there so that the homeowner, on the homeowner acknowledgement, is there an email form on there? I guess what I'm trying to get at is there a way that we're contacting the homeowner as well as the contractor to say there's a rejection letter so there's more than one eye on it?
Yes, we do that. If you provide the information, we send it to you. We can only provide communication to the contact information that we're provided. A lot of times what happens is, and you're right, that is a problem industry-wide in every jurisdiction. Someone will hire someone, and they probably should, because this is complicated stuff, just in general. They hire a contractor, they get a permit, and sometimes the contractor doesn't communicate maybe as well as they could, and there's a miscommunication, and they're angry at the jurisdiction for their perceived delay or a real delay, and it turns out their contractor just didn't tell them that they were rejected 3 months ago and never got back to us with information. That happens every day. So yeah, that is an issue. I would recommend that people, follow the process more closely. Like if you're hiring a contractor, kind of watch them, check on them once in a while, check the permit status online. You can check to see if the status says it's in review, that means it's in review with us. If the status says waiting on, submitted documents, waiting for a resubmittal of documents, then that means that we're waiting for the applicant. It is the person who pulls the permit applicant is responsible for the permit. A lot of times that's a contractor. Sometimes it's a homeowner acting as a contractor. But you're right, that's a communication issue. So I guess, to be simple, provide as much information as you want. If you want to be copied on emails, then include both the contractor and the homeowner's email when you apply. I'd be happy to, we do that now, we copy them on it.
So you'll just transfer that over into the iWorks system?
Oh, yeah,
automatically
yeah,
sends
that
it out.
shouldn't be an issue. It's not really built that way. You have to manually, unfortunately, you do have to manually select both of the emails, but that's not a huge deal. Just provide information. If you want to copy another person, give us the email and we'll include them on that. So they're kind of in the loop. On top of, again, you can click on the link and get the information. It's all online, and all the permit information, the documentation is downloadable as well.
Now, is there any kind of provision in the iWork where whenever there's a status change of a permit, that an email goes out? So like if it passes a certain benchmark or this kind of thing that, so it's not just, we're waiting on something and we need you. It's just that, so someone can keep track of the permit as it's working through the system without going on and searching.
Yeah. Like I said, we'll look into seeing if there's more automation that can happen. There's a constant struggle, especially with software. The more automation you build into something, the slower the system works. Technology-wise, the more you do that, for example, there's a system called EnerGov, and that was set up and is used by many jurisdictions, but it's much more expensive and it's much slower. And it doesn't have automation. And if you add automation, they say it'll slow it down even more. So, in other words, that we'll look into it, but I think this system is some of the strengths of the iWork system is that it is somewhat simple, and that it doesn't require a lot of resources computing-wise. So it moves pretty quickly. When you click on something, it takes a second or two, and you're on to the next page. It doesn't take 3 to 5 minutes or crash the entire system, which happens with some other software that I'm aware of. So we'll look into it, see what we can do to.
And that's the point. I realize that, changing software there's a learning curve on it. But that's why I think it really should be a staff decision. But then we also know that we're going to have years of heavy permitting activity. And if we get some efficiency and some transparency from a piece of software, then I think that it really is up to staff to decide whether to come to us and say, this is going to cost so much money, but here's what the benefits could be.
I agree. Again, we're in that process now. We've already started talking with all the different department heads and having meetings, and I know that that Frank is setting up some appointments to get some demos with some other software and see what the costs are, what are the potential benefits or not. Looking into that. So that's underway for sure. I don't want to say too much because I don't feel like that is necessarily going to solve anything. I've seen it completely break a system and destroy a jurisdiction's department.
That sounds
I've seen that happen. Okay, so I don't want to promise too much, but there are some potential. It will cost more. iWork is a very inexpensive program, so that's a benefit. Talking a matter of a few thousand dollars, and as opposed to potentially millions of dollars for some others.
You know, the biggest issue I have with iWork is that chronological order that seems to get messed up. Review date, you know, the permit came in this day. The next thing should be the next step and the next step, but it gets jumbled in there sometimes, and there's completed date and scheduled date. What is scheduled date? Does that even need to
For
be there?
inspections, they'll be scheduled. So for inspections, you'll have a scheduled date, so you'll go on there and you'll request using your codes, I'd like to have an inspection tomorrow. And we've been able to meet that standard. Like, next day you get your inspection. Which, you know, by the way, we're doing very well with. Not every jurisdiction is being able to do that now. So you have a scheduled date, it'll show up as, you know, the next day, and then when you get your inspection completed, they'll enter in that result, and it'll be both the scheduled date and the completed date will be the same date in the records.
Nope, I see that, but just looking at this one, you've got plan review box here, inspections here, fees here, and payment dates here.
Right.
If you are gonna have there's a lot of scheduled dates, scheduled date, completed date, and then received date, all in the same, all three, and that's the kind of clunkiness that I'm talking about. And if there's a way through iWorks to say, plan reviews, or you know, you received it on this date, there's no need to have two other date sections on there. And I think that's where a lot of confusion happens, because we've had, and you've heard it, someone's like, under scheduled, it says the same date is completed date. Well, I should be getting my permit the same date. Well, no, but it just seems like it's auto-populating the same date that the completed date was in the plan review section, but then the inspection date's different.
Well, the plan review happens before the issuance of a permit, and then the inspections happen after the issuance of a permit, so it wouldn't be happening at the same time. I see what you're saying. I want to set expectations. It's important to do that. They're not going to be able to change their system entirely like that. I mean, I want to say that you cannot just have them change the entire system nationwide for just little old Fort Myers Beach. I would love if they did that, but however, and it won't be able to change how it's displayed, most likely. We can look into it to see if we can streamline it, but the review process, there's a target date. Okay, a target date is something we set internally. It says, like, we'd love to get this done in 3 days. If all possible, we want to shoot for that. A lot of times that happens, or not. But in most cases it does. We set that target date. The reviewers have that in their system. They see it. They try to shoot for that review to be complete. Then they enter it in as complete, and it should show up as review completed, and they'll show a result, like, you know, approved or reviewed with conditions, or, you know, requires a resubmittal. That
So
kind
you
of
just
thing.
said something that's, so in order to change what we'd want to change, they'd have to change it globally. Every software I've ever seen or been involved with, it's specific, especially my wife sells medical software, and it's specifically designed for each specific, whether you're a dentist, whether, so these operating systems can't do that?
Generally, no. They sell these software providers sell a package. It's a system, and then it's set up so that how you want to process the information, that sometimes you can tweak a little bit. Typically, they do have you set it up, but the system, the way it operates, the way the screens look, the way the general layout of the system, how it operates, that's typically a process that if they're going to change it, they have to change it for all jurisdictions. That's generally the way it works. I see what you're saying. If you had somebody program something for you, and you had a guy here, a specialist that worked as an engineer or programmer, you could have him update your software and have it display however you want. However, in exchange for a very low price on the software, in the area of, you know, $16,000 for a software package, you get kind of what you pay for. I mean, it's simple and it does work, but you can't really customize it too much.
I don't want to bog down everybody's time with this. Is technical stuff. We could talk about this offline, but we'll talk more about this because this is annoying.
Communication plan items is we have a permitting work group on the website.
I bet you're wishing you just said yes or no now.
Steve, if I could just briefly, this might be a simple suggestion. I'm certainly not trying to make your life more complicated than it already is. No, you've been kind enough to come to every council meeting, and you're in the back. I know you're working back there on your computer. It might be helpful, since there's such interest in this area, and this is simple since you're here already. Maybe when we do town manager items, maybe we just have the town manager yield and just kind of give an update every time we have a council meeting. Here's what we're seeing, here's the trends we're seeing, here's a couple things that people are doing that they need to be thinking about. Here's where we're making some real progress, and here's, just kind of give us maybe an update. And you've been coming up sporadically when there was a question, which is great, but it might be we might want to institutionalize that for the next year while especially if you're at the meeting, just give us an update and just kind of talk a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the trends and the positive things you're seeing. That's just from a communication standpoint. People, when you say something right now, people are hungering for information from you. They're fascinated by what you're seeing, what the challenges are, and how they can do it right so they can get through the process and comply and so forth. So I think whenever you've got a lot of great information that people are hungering for. So maybe if we could just build that in, since you're here already, just maybe give us a little update each time we have a meeting. I just think people are very interested when you speak, because a lot of people's lives hinge on what you're saying and so forth. So again, I think just from a communication standpoint, that might be helpful.
Sure. Like I said, I'm here. Happy to help. Just call me up and we'll, shoot me some questions. I wish this whole system was simpler, but it's outside of our control. As John started this conversation with, I said, the laws are what they are. We have to follow them. We do. In the background, we know that every day going into work, we have to follow these rules, and it's not always enjoyable to say that to someone, like, look, I know you'd like to build it back a certain way. I understand what you're saying, but the rules are what they are. I cannot vary from the law. That makes it sometimes an uncomfortable place, an uncomfortable situation, but we try to communicate that in the best way without, and understandably so. This is the difficult times that we're living through, just in general, and just continue to do the best we can.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
So back to
Yeah, we got a little off
communications.
topic there, didn't we?
Are you done? You want to do your part, Bill?
I still want to, I'm going to try to say whatever I say now without triggering the broader conversation. The other thing is,
It's all right. It's good conversation.
yeah, it's always, communication is always good, as you would probably attest to. So the other thing is about what you touched on, and I don't, and I don't know how much this would take, that when you sign a new account, that you can get customizable information in front of you. So like if you have, and I'm not sure what the capabilities would be or how much it would take to say that if I sign on and I have assigned these properties and right away those come up as an easy link. If I have an interest in turtles or redevelopment or council actions, then maybe that news is customized to me, so that people can get what they want. Because I realize it's complicated. There's a lot of stuff on the webpage. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of people don't care about everything. They have certain topics, and that's what they want to know. So, and I'm averse to getting new logins that require a 20-character password with 3, punctuations and caps and all this kind of stuff. But if it has value, if having that login gives me something that makes my life easier, then that's something that I would tend to use.
Gotcha. We can look into that. Yeah. I'm not sure the total capability of our sign-in login thing, but in subscription, but we'll look into it.
And I understand the limitations with iWork, but for me personally, I like and maybe it's not possible. Just that if I could get copied on every activity that happens with permits, even though I have a contractor who's also getting it, because it allows me also to know that to keep an eye on my contractor.
Gotcha.
And that's all I have.
Anybody think of anything else while everybody else was talking?
Probably, but run while you can.
No, it's all good. We've never had this conversation before publicly, so it's awesome. It's good stuff. So.
Well, for me, it's you're the professional. You're the PIO person. You're the one that, you may have been handcuffed in the past, but hopefully you're not handcuffed now.
No, not at all.
Do you?
I mean, we're doing this, so
Yeah.
this is not handcuffed at all.
And what I take from this is that the 5 of you have agreed to do videos, so we're just
Absolutely, we
ecstatic
were
about
talking-
that. Going to make you a star, rock star.
We didn't tell you were in every one of them.
Oh.
He's
Gonna
joking,
do it
but
right
we have
after your
talked about that,
podcast.
so be prepared.
There's always got to be a villain.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Next, we got pedestrian overpasses. Whose item was this? I'm guessing Vice Mayor Adholt?
No, I think it was actually mine.
Was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we were talking, I made this suggestion a while ago, we decided to put on the MMP, is that if any development spans Estero Boulevard, that they be required to put in a pedestrian overpass. And, because I know that, in my mind, the only place where they're really effective is where there's development on both sides of Estero. And if we don't get it somehow in the code, then we're just gonna get more places where we're gonna have a lot of pedestrian traffic crossing the road in the middle of a development.
So you're saying that, like a Margaritaville, where they have buildings on both sides?
Right.
So not just like going from Yotako to Lani Kai?
No, it would be more like, well, let's say if the Lanikai wanted to do a major redevelopment, right? Then maybe that would be part of the major redevelopment. The red coconut. The red coconut is going to be a development that spans both sides of the road. Now, if everyone's walking across the street there, it could become another, dangerous and traffic slowing place. And if and typically, if a development is going to span both sides of Estero, they're probably going to have to follow like a TPI model, you hope, where they have kind of light development on the beach side because of the V zone and more back behind. So they get all their people that are going to the beach and they're all going across the road. So I think just having that as a part of the code, and maybe we could, have staff couch it in a way where if it's a development on both sides of Estero over a certain size, so it's not a guy who has a 7-Eleven on one side and, something else on the other.
Well, but Outrigger could be part of that too. I mean, that would be another one along with Red Coconut, where the people who purchase that, they purchase the Outrigger side and Charlie's side.
Right, right.
So they're going to have both sides.
Well, and that's where I'm kind of going. Trying to think in my head how many pieces of property where that's even feasible, where they're going to have two sides of the road. And if we're talking about essentially just potentially two properties, does it make sense to make a policy on something that's only two when it could be something that's used as a part of negotiation? Should they want more than what they're allowed? I'm just struggling with is it necessary to create a policy for two properties?
Well, I think it's potentially more, and we don't know, the future development. But I think why put it out there as a potential incentive when you can just make it where it's appropriate and make it something that has to be done. I mean, I'm kind of,
if I may, so we're clear, we cannot negotiate for something more than what's allowed. If you didn't realize, Mayor, you said that. We have to.
Let me rephrase that. What's by right?
But yeah.
There you go.
So or discretionary. The other issue with respect to the actual dune walkover, that's what's on the street walkover is, keep in mind that may involve a decision that we would have to consult with either the county, who's the owner of the road, or FDOT, depending upon where it might go. So just letting you know that, but if it's the policy directive, tell us and we can put in the draft regs that whenever possible, if a project or a property is over a certain size on both sides of the road, the project should provide for a proposed walkover or bridge.
And, I don't think it's necessarily without precedent, because there's certainly lots of sizes trigger different things, locations trigger different things in the code. And, I'm rather uncomfortable with the idea of making everything about a negotiation for a specific project. Because, it just opens the door and it becomes very subjective. So if someone, really values pedestrian walkovers, then what do you have to give away to do that? And that becomes in the eye of the beholder. And that kind of makes me nervous. I think that I more prefer a structured kind of set of rules, as opposed to, someone puts on a charm offensive and then gets support for something that is clearly out of the norm.
I'm looking at it either way. I see your point as well. To me, it doesn't make sense to make a policy decision on this, so that's my 2 cents.
let me just, as somebody who's obsessed with pedestrian walkovers, and I'm guilty as charged, I think they're a part of the solution to our traffic congestion, and quite frankly, in certain areas, a big part of our solution. I appreciate the sentiment, Councilor Veach. I don't have quite your aversion to having them be the negotiated piece of the public benefit aspect, particularly if they go outside the, request additional consideration outside the LDC or the comp plan. I would maybe compromise, Councilor Veach, maybe this is something we can build into the comp plan as a goal for the town as we put our new comp plan or revised comp plan together. I see each situation unique. I think there are more than two. I agree. I think that the most recent one, I had never thought about the outrigger, but that's another great concept. Having met with them, that makes a lot more sense than people might think, given the potential plan of attack for the outrigger. And quite honestly, I had a conversation yesterday, and I shouldn't say this, but I'll just say it because it's the pink shell, because they're going to be coming forward with some ideas as well. There's a potential for a walkover there, and there's a piece of this walkover puzzle that I had not thought of before and was brought to my attention. It's very interesting in that, and again, I've talked to the Lani Kai folks about it. They're open to the idea. They've got interests on the other side of Estero, and so that could be part of a negotiated dynamic, depending on what their plans are going forward. But there's also a piece of this puzzle that was interesting, that if you have a liquor license and you're on the Gulf side of Estero, and you've got a piece of property on the other side, and you connect through a pedestrian walkover, that liquor license then, and that's the only way that liquor license can transfer over to the other side of Estero, which, and John, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is what somebody who's pretty learned in this told me. That's a great way to not have to get another liquor license, and it's a real benefit to that particular developer. So which is great because it encourages people to, it's another reason to build a pedestrian walkover aside from the obvious reasons. I think they're so important, they're such an important part of our future as an island that, if that's the will of the council, I'll support it. But I think it's better to do it on a case-by-case basis because I think as you negotiate public benefit, I think that's a big piece of the negotiation. And we should we should be very transparent about it in our comp plan, that these are the goals of the town. And as we discuss what our definition of public benefit is, that ought to certainly be one of the top items on the list. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I'm also hearing from, from some of these developer proposals that they're claiming a public benefit that really isn't a public benefit. I mean, that it's really a business decision on some of this. So I appreciate that, and I'd like to hear if John knows if that's true. They connect the property together they can share a liquor license.
I would have to check. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I want to frame the discussion, if I might, in the proper context. I don't want unreasonable expectations to arise either on the council's side through this discussion, and more importantly, on people, on developers who may come before the town council and say, well, I heard you all say that if I proffer and propose and get approved a pedestrian walkover, you all are going to give me more entitlements than what is otherwise allowed. Again, what is allowed, and it is a framing of the language in the comprehensive plan in the LDC, but you cannot, and I encourage you all not to say, we will negotiate something above and beyond what our comprehensive plan and our land development code provides for this public benefit. You cannot proffer or suggest or promise that you're going to give a developer something that's not allowed in your comprehensive plan and land development code. We can write those documents as we move forward in very general terms to give you flexibility, but you must stay within the confines of those documents. You cannot promise, and again, I encourage all of you to be careful with how you express this issue well, we'll give you something more than what's allowed. You can't give something more than what's allowed. That, by definition, is what's allowed.
Well, and this is where it gets confusing. And what's allowed and what's allowed by right are two separate things.
Correct. They're, for example, the CPD process, you can negotiate and you can develop site-specific criteria for that based upon that. And it's written into the code to give you that flexibility. And as I said before, we can, as we move forward, as we amend the code, as we amend the comprehensive plan, provide for that flexibility. But it won't, it cannot say, and if you do this, we'll give you more than what we would otherwise allow. There's a maximum that has to be established somewhere in your comprehensive plan and land development code, and it's what you can do, as the mayor said, that you are entitled to as of right, versus if you go the CPD route, what can then be created for that site because of its specific needs, its specific characteristics, and that's where you have that flexibility. But again, to make it absolutely clear, there's no ability to promise something that's outside of what's provided for in the comprehensive plan or land development code.
And I understand what you're saying, John, but when someone goes through the CBD process, and that's essentially what you're doing, but you're just doing it site-specifically. But they include that and they ask for other things, and it's all kind of in a mix.
But there's still a maximum density and a maximum intensity that's assigned to every property within your code and your comprehensive plan. And you can't say, well, if you now give us this, we're going to increase that intensity or that density above and beyond what the comprehensive plan and land development code says. Does that make sense? I mean, sometimes I'm accused of being too talkative, and
no, it certainly makes sense to me, and I made that misspoke once already this week about it.
Well, if we could, if I could just digress briefly, and I don't have we're going to get to agenda management soon, and I don't have my list in front of me, but about maybe 2 months ago, I'd asked, and everybody agreed, for us to have a conversation, maybe for lack of a better term, a brief seminar from the town attorney on amendment to the comp plan, CPD, variance, special exceptions. So not only can we better understand the nuances, but the public can as well. Is that still on our list of things to do?
I haven't seen this, but
You remember when I made that pitch? I don't have the list.
Assuming I'm still in this chair.
I'm not saying now's the time, but
I will work with staff to have that on the next MNP.
that would be great. That would be great. I think that would be helpful to not only the
it's not
public,
on
but to
here.
ourselves. Yeah, you guys remember us talking about that? Okay, that just needs to get on the list if it could, because this is obviously going to be very salient as we move forward.
So I guess.
Oh, yeah, it is. I'm sorry. It's number 66.
It was listed as TBD, and
Yeah, I
it's
see it.
now going
Yeah.
to reflect the August MNP.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You brought it up on the 6th.
Great. That's all good. Thank you.
All right, so, to me, it still makes more sense just to put this in the code. If it's something you really want, that's the way to make sure it's done, even if it's only a few instances, but it puts it there for the future. But if there's no support in council, I won't move forward. I just think that if it's something, Vice Mayor, that you think is important.
Bill, I just need to understand the ramifications of what you're suggesting. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I don't feel like we fully vetted the legal implications of it. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I think it's so vital to our community. I think traffic congestion is going to be the #1 issue for this island, and I have no patience for people to say that we can never be able to do anything about it. It's always going to be. We can't solve it maybe, but we can certainly mitigate it. And so I will never say no to any suggestion that helps on that front. So I just feel like here today, I think we would need our attorney to do a legal analysis of it. How would that ordinance look? How would it be applied? Could a developer contest that? What rights do we have to impose? I think it just needs to be developed a little bit more before I could opine on it.
And I think that's I don't know if that would be another M&P or that would be the next step towards getting something on the agenda is to have the town look at the relative law, come up with some language, and then we'd be looking at the specifics instead
I
of
think
just
that would
as
be
a general.
helpful instead of a general. I think that would be helpful to see specific language as opposed to just a general conversation.
Okay, so that's 2 people. Anybody?
I'm certainly open to talking about it, discussing it.
Okay, so Andy?
John?
Good direction?
John, you got anything you want to say?
I'm okay with exploring it further as well.
Okay. Anything else, Counselor Reed?
Not on that item.
All right. Next is ordinance 18-06, boards, committees, and commissions. Who's starting this out?
I think this was mine. I know
Okay.
it was mine. This goes back to conversations that we had probably even last spring. And I'm going to ask that Vice Mayor Adderholt jump into, because he's the liaison for CellCab. I'm the liaison for BORCAB. But we had a number of meetings. There was conversation about combining CellCab and BORCAB and CRAB, and we met several times independently with our groups and then jointly between BORCAB and CellCab. And what was the final result of that is that CRAB basically had not met in over 2 years. And so BORCAB and CellCab really had their own streams of interests and concerns, and they wanted to remain separate. However, we all agreed that we could distribute the duties of CRAB between us so that BORCAB, for example, would be taking all things park and recreation. CellCab would focus more on historical and education. I think I have that correct.
That's how I remember it. I think with the only exception to that was I think Newton Park stays with CellCab, if I remember
Newton
it correctly.
Park stays with CellCab.
But everything else,
yes.
I agree with that 100%, yep.
Yeah. So we
And
never.
Just to interject before you go too far on that. So was that decision to keep Newton Park as part of CellCab before Ian?
I believe so, yes.
Yes, it was before Ian.
And so that
that
may be
maybe that's
what-
more
yeah,
discussion.
More discussion, yeah.
But it never got any further than the 2 advisory committees, and they really want to, now that we've started up our advisory committee meetings again, this is one of the things on the agenda that they want to know about this distinction and where we're going to land with it. So it needs to come to the council to be ratified, if you will, and put into place. And so I think that would be our next step.
I would support that.
Yeah, I think if the 2 committees agree on how to divvy up and fill the holes left by CRAB, I'm okay with whatever they come up with.
Would that be a crab hole?
So when could we put this on the agenda?
Provide a further update. The actual applicable ordinance is 22-10. There was an ordinance that my office drafted at the then town council's direction to consolidate a number of the advisory boards into one that had overlapping or duplicative functions. And also, you all may recall that at that time, Murph wanted to change its name, which and to clarify its functions. It went through first reading as originally proposed, and then at second reading, after apparently feedback from several of the advisory committees, all the language addressing the consolidation of several of the committees was deleted and dropped. And the only modification that went forward was changing the name of Murph and clarifying its functions. We could distribute that ordinance to you all
Sean,
later today.
Sean, that's exactly what happened, and that's right. But I guess what I don't remember was had we had we negotiated the settlement between CellCab and BorCab at that point, or was that the original language that consolidated the two?
It's the original.
It was the original. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not, I certainly defer to both you and.
I just
Councilwoman,
can't remember what,
Woodson
yeah.
as to what
No, we-
further discussions.
We
have
we
been-
would want the post-negotiation language that clarifies the,
So,
Yeah.
we're just wanted to update you, and we're ready and willing to move forward as you all may direct.
I support that effort.
If we could, what I would ask, I think, to make our job easier is if someone could forward us what appears to have been the negotiated settlement between the overlapping or dual functions, so we can then reflect that in the proposed ordinance.
Any other questions?
You know, another thing that I think was kind of suggested to me is that maybe one of the things that CRAB kind of dealt with lightly were beach accesses, and you know, the other option is to get beach accesses to Murph.
I think the beach accesses were discussed as part of Park and Recreation, and falling under BorCab.
It's just
That's
just
how I
an
remember
idea.
it. That's how I remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
We do not want to readdress this issue and the fragility of those negotiations. Whatever was decided before was after extensive negotiations by the
Exactly.
parties. So I think whatever is consistent with what was decided before would be great.
Mhm.
They were very in-depth
They were very in-depth.
negotiations.
Yeah, and basically the summary of it is BorCab taking all things Park and Recreation, CellCab focusing on historical, education, and Newton Park.
Okay, your direction?
All right. We'll attempt to codify that.
But you know, I would in the next committee meetings, I just refer to Newton Park because you know the cultural part of it kind of washed away.
Still historical.
Any other comments on this? All right, agenda management. Councilor King?
I've got something that I'd like to see, and if there's a willingness. A couple months ago, I got introduced to a Florida Gulf Coast University professor here at Diamond Head, and we had an interesting talk in how communities succeed and fail. They need healthy, for lack of a better term, I guess, fractions of private businesses, hotels, motels, those kinds of things. I thought it was interesting, and especially with what we're going through right now in lieu of Moss Marina and some other potential things out there, just to get that insight, not only for us, but as the Vice Mayor's mentioned many times before, the people watching. And I think to me, at least, it would be a healthy presentation if we could get him to do that if he's interested.
Sounds interesting, John.
Yep.
You know, I know there's a book under a similar name, like it's like 7 Ways Towns Fail or something. Is this related to this professor?
I'm sorry, I don't know that.
I got to be so negative, Bill. Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. Got it, Amy? Anything else, Councilor King?
I will forward the information. That's it.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Nothing further, thank you.
The only thing I have is, it'd be nice to add, we had, sorry, I misplaced her name now in my head, from the Garden Club that was just here at our meeting on Tuesday. I'd like to have her added to come in and talk about all things related. You know, we had made some conversation about looking at Estero Boulevard, the part of area there, and then there's some other areas that I think there's some potential to try to get some greenery back on the island. It'd be nice to have her to be able to come in and present some things and kind of enlighten us as to, she made a comment that stuck in my head that she doesn't feel that it's appropriate quite yet to start planting things, and I'd like to get a little more information on that. So that way she's not confined to 3 minutes to kind of give us a presentation.
That's a great idea.
Yep.
What type of meeting do you want her added to?
It's an M&P.
M&P.
M&P meeting.
Yeah, because I know it was after the vice mayor was talking about trying to clean up that little park strip, that I was riding my bike and noticed that so much of that park strip is just full of tons of debris, and if you put a mower on that, I want to be nowhere near it.
That's all I had. Councilor Woodson?
The last three items, 576 or 567, however you want to find that, on the agenda management list. Right now, I mean, we've had discussions about all of this, especially as recent as this morning on Times Square and CB Zone, and rather than have these to be determined for the date at M&P, you know, I think it's really important if I look at the beach school right now. So we're moving forward, we're getting that rebuilt. As businesses start coming back, we really need to partner with recruiting plans for them on how we sell the beach to workers. We need to talk about the attendance for the beach school and helping them get their enrollment up. And, you know, I know for a fact Margaritaville has already started, you know, their recruitment plans and that type of thing. I've had a couple of sidebar conversations with their HR director, but I think we need to really give some direction and help on that. The same thing with the Veterans and Tribute at Bayside Park. If we're going to move forward with reestablishing Bayside Park in the very, very near future with the funding, that needs to be part of the overall picture. And so to get that on a discussion right away before it gets lost again.
If I could just comment on the beach school piece of that puzzle, we're still waiting for the school district to appoint their members of the ad hoc committee, as well as the parents need to narrow their number down just by one. And to your point about the partnership with the business community, I think one of our challenges is, given the we have some relative certainty that we know now that the school district will not be able to start the beach school on August 10th for the regular school year, and it'll likely be in November. The challenge is, and I've been approached by businesses as to, hey, what's the schedule? Because we want to plan some work schedules around it, and there's a little bit of volatility still with respect to when the before school program will start, when the school, what the school day will look like, what the after school program will look like. So, but your point is well taken. But we're waiting for just a bit more certainty on that, so we can then provide that detail to the employers. But it's a fair question, and certainly something we ought to focus on. For the town manager's benefit, the Bayside Park piece, obviously with the hurricane and the chaos, there has been significant discussion about the Veterans Memorial or monument. There was, in terms of how we handle that. Before the hurricane, I had suggested an idea for a monument. The artist who designed the Vietnam Memorial happens to reside in Sanibel, and is a good friend of Barbara Hill, who chairs our CELCAB committee. And we had as a council, at least informally, adopted or got comfortable with a quote from John F. Kennedy and a quote from Ronald Reagan, honoring our veterans, to pair those two together with this sort of monument that would potentially be designed by this artist from Sanibel who designed the Vietnam Memorial. So that's where we left it. I thought that was a really cool approach. But as you and Jason and others designed the Bayside renewal, you got to just kind of think about that in the back of your head as to how that might work. We don't have a budget for this. The artist has not been formally contacted yet, but is a good friend of Barbara's. But so we don't have a price point on that either. But everything was obviously in complete disarray with the hurricane. But that's kind of where we were, Councilor Woodson, on that. If people are still comfortable with that, we could go in another direction. But that's kind of where we were pre-hurricane.
I just don't want it to get lost.
Yep.
in
No.
the
Fair
shuffle
point.
again.
Fair
Yeah,
point.
I know it's been a long, hard slog, and unfortunately, one of our veteran leaders here in the community is now gone. who was kind of driving that.
But before he left, and he's still around occasionally, but before he left, he was comfortable with that idea.
All right,
Just
good.
for the record, yeah.
And likewise, you know, you see that the Times Square conversation was put on back in December. I think that we can also be proactive and bring that into maybe the August M&P and have some of the business people here and have a conversation about that. I've already come up with like a list of 5 ways that I know it could look, from not great to not quite so great. But there's a lot of possibility there, and I think maybe just really start to have an open conversation here as the chamber, or about the town council, about, you know, how far we want to go with it, what makes sense.
I'm good, thank you.
Counselor Beach?
Okay, the comp plan discussion, moving that up, I know I already talked about that. I've also heard a lot about Spakowski. They're involved with our original comp plan. They seem to be well thought of. I don't know them very well, but I wonder if we want to consider bringing them in to the conversation as someone who just knows our island better, and is maybe we can get things resolved faster.
They were, Counselor Veach, they were an original bidder on the comp plan proposal, and I think the vote was 3-2 to not select them, against my wishes, but it was obviously a very friendly discussion, and we didn't realize how things would kind of fall out as a result of that choice. But I am very open to that idea, Counselor Veach, and would be supportive in conjunction with the town manager and whoever, you know, you've got to wrestle with a lot of different things and contracts, et cetera. But I think our current providers actually already burned through their budget. So I don't know what their contractual obligation is still for the town, but I'm certainly open. I think as the mayor said earlier too, to if we need to go another direction, let's do it. And I think that's certainly a good starting point, Counselor Veach.
Okay, so Andy, you'll look into that. And okay, the other thing is that there's a couple of ordinances that were being worked on before the storm. We have a tree and a vegetation ordinance that I think have already been vetted through MRF, and we're waiting just to get on the agenda. I'd like to see those start to be talked about, because, you know, it's good to have those in place before people start replanting. And you know, there's a lot of thought that's gone into them. There's another ordinance which is on here, which is it's a water restriction ordinance, and this is nothing. This is basically saying, you know, like during certain periods, what days of the week can you water and this kind of stuff. It was a model ordinance that we were compelled to adopt, and I think almost every municipality in Lee County has done it, but we haven't. And so that should. Are you familiar with that, John?
I thought we'd already processed that one. Oh, okay. So but yes, we basically took the model ordinance that was prepared, I believe, by the Water Management District, and strongly encouraged. And I think there may actually be some language in our comprehensive plan that says that we're supposed to adopt regulations fostering or encouraging water conservation, and so we'll put it back. We'll put it on the agenda.
Yeah, like. Sorry,
Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say those 3 things: the tree ordinance, which hasn't been, I don't think it's been vetted through MRF and with staff, the vegetation ordinance, and this water ordinance. I'd like to see them get on rapidly on a future agenda.
John, how does it work with, if the county puts out because we get our water from the county, how does it work if the county puts out a no water ban on certain days, or, you know, like they kind of do for outdoor fires and things like that? Does that supersede what we do then? Since
No,
we are getting water from them?
we are our own jurisdiction. We buy our water in bulk from the city. From the county under the existing agreement. What I believe the ordinance actually says is that if the Water Management District adopts an emergency order or some other regulation that is more restrictive, then we have to follow the Water Management District guidelines and whatever they dictate. Otherwise, we fall back on our regulations.
Makes sense.
Okay, so is there some consensus to move forward with these?
I thought we did that on Monday already. Didn't you bring it up on Monday to talk about these 3 ordinances?
Yeah, but now we're in the agenda management to put them on
I
the actual town council agenda?
I think one of the addendums to that, Counselor Beach, was I'd asked, particularly for the new counselors, and quite honestly, for my memory as well, just to get kind of an overview of what all 3 of these are and what they've involved. And it's been a long time. I just don't remember. Be nice to have some kind of a conversation and an overview of what each one are and see that language. I just can't remember.
So you would like it to come back to an M&P meeting to discuss before it goes to a regular council meeting? Is what you're
I'm
asking.
not trying to be a bureaucratic here, but if you tell me what these, if somebody put a gun to my head and asked me to describe all 3 of these ordinances, I couldn't tell you what was in them.
You know, they basically just encourage planting certain plants and discourage planting ones that are invasive, that are going to get in your neighborhood. There's also some language in there about minimum landscaping. So I know that particularly with a lot of vacation rentals or people who are snowbirds, they want just a rock yard, and it kind of discourages that kind of development without, I think there's some minimum, there may even be already, there's some minimum number of trees that you have to have on a lot and that kind of thing.
You just cemented in my head. I'm okay with seeing it come back to a management and planning session to have a look at it.
Okay, so we can bring the documents as they are, so we have documents to actually
That'd be
look
fine.
at.
Sure. That'd be great.
Sure.
Yep.
All right. I'm okay, except maybe the water one is a little more advanced. It was getting ready to come to council anyway. So they can
Yeah,
just move that one right through to a.
My recollection of that particular one is essentially all we were doing was taking the model ordinance, we customized it obviously to Fort Myers Beach, and we're going to bring it forward obviously before the storm, whatever the council's direction is.
So can we just bring that one right to town council, just to get it out of the way?
Oh, I just would like to see it.
Yeah.
I don't have any doubts that it's noble and everything, but I've just not seen it. So I'd love to at least see a draft of it.
And keep in mind, though, the water one was getting ready to come to town council before the storm.
Right, but a lot's changed since then. I mean, now people are going to be planting a lot of new things which require more water, and how does that, what was written before the storm work with what they're going to need immediately after the storm? It doesn't hurt looking at it.
You can. I mean, I don't think those things are in the ordinance. Again, even me, I don't really recall the details, but a lot of it had to do with just how you enact water restrictions in a drought. That's most of it.
Yeah, I think the fact that none of us really remember what's in it, it makes more sense to have it brought to an M&P just to look through it, get it out of the way. And
Hey, in some ways, everything before Ian looks like it's a different world and a life you're looking at on TV somewhere.
yeah.
Okay, now we also talked about moving okay, I already talked about that. Okay, Resilient Lee. Danielle printed up the town's summary list. Now, I'm not going to go through this in any kind of detail because this is pretty much throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. So it's a little bit of everything. It came from different sources. And is on it. There's also one that did not get printed that was sent to you, which is the Resilient Hub that I talked about at the last meeting, and you guys wanted more information on. And again, this is a proposal that is still got a lot of gray areas, still got a lot of negotiations, and even if we got funding, there'd be a way towards working towards it. But certainly the point that you made, Mayor, about we never want to be in the situation we were after Ian, where communication was just so bad. And it was only communication. Most of the town council and the town manager didn't have a vehicle. So it was not even the option of driving to somewhere where you could communicate wasn't an option for a lot of people. So the idea of a resilient hub is according to the definition I read, is it's not just having an emergency operations center. It's also having a place where you're prepared to be able to have autonomous power, have a place where people can go comfortably charge their devices, have internet access, all the things that they were doing basically in a parking lot here in the weeks after the storm. And in addition, if we combine things like with the new Bay Oaks, and maybe you could even have an emergency short-term shelter after storms for people. So, and a resilient hub is one of the buzzwords that are being used in Resilient Lee. So it's a way to try to hopefully get some more leverage and get more of an opportunity for funding. And in that package is, the expensive part is acquiring land, and that's something I really want to push with this community development block grant money, because it's one of the things we're probably the best qualified to get out of it. So you all have it. If you want to look it over next time we meet, I think it's December when they're supposed to finalize an action plan. So there's still time to discuss it.
Councilor Veach, I appreciate having this. It's great to see all the detail, the granularity of it all. Just a quick question on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth one down, workforce housing downtown, the address of 1661 Estero Boulevard. What is that? Just out of curiosity.
That's the Kia Estero shops. And I put them in there, number one, because of proximity. They would all depend on a willing seller. None of these are anticipating any kind of eminent domain or anything like that. But there's a potential to work with the owner or to acquire it. He's using it mostly as a parking lot. It's very underutilized for the office space above.
No, I was just trying to relate the address to a property, so
Yeah.
that helps me. Thank you. Yeah.
And there's things here too that are not in our jurisdiction, things on San Carlos Island, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it's a lot to digest, so we can talk about that at a different meeting. And the last thing, and one thing I'm finding that is a bit of a chill for some people that I know about redeveloping their house, or even where they want to keep a lot, is what the council direction is with some of these high-density projects. Because I know a lot of residents who are saying if some of these projects go in, that they're going to sell and leave. Or they're waiting to see. And that just slows down getting people back in their houses. So I wouldn't mind, and I've mentioned this before, that we have a real conversation about what kind of density is acceptable. Because, even with water taxis and pedestrian overpasses, we still have one 2-lane road. And I know that, we talked numerous times about how difficult it is to make our traffic better, but one thing I can assure you is we can make it worse. And I get the feeling that there's a lot of anticipation that a lot of these big projects, 100 units per acre, are going to go through. And if you start approving some of these, then you're kind of obligated to give the same consideration to every subsequent project. I started a process of going through and looking around of all the properties that I thought would be redeveloped on Estero Island and Old San Carlos. And there's a lot of them. And if you allow this kind of density on all of them, I calculate, and I'm still kind of working on it, be around 7,000 additional units, which would more than double the size of the town. So I think I just want to make sure that we're cautious going forward with density, and we can send a message to people about what they can expect going forward.
Well, I've been trying to say all along, and I've said it several times over the last couple of weeks, when people say we need direction, well, we have direction. I think John alluded to it earlier. We have a comp plan, we have a land development code. If there's a discussion to amend those or change those to allow more, that's where you need to start having the conversation. If people are bringing forth developments that are outside what is allowed in our current comp plan and land development code, assuming that something's going to change, that's on them. Because as John said, we can't change it. We can't go over those thresholds. So to me, it seems like a lot of carts are getting put in before the horse. And we haven't had those discussions. We've had preliminary discussions with the LPA about FAR specifically, but what is the desire of the community through the LPA and then to the council to amend what those intensities and densities are? Is there a will to do that? If not, then there's really not a lot to talk about.
And that's an interesting point, because I know I was talking to one potential developer, and he kind of casually mentioned that they have their people and they would help us amend the comp plan for the project.
My only point is if there's a willingness in the community through the LPA and the council to change the comp plan, then let's have that conversation. If there's not, then there's the direction. I don't know how much more simple it can be.
Yeah, if I may, I think part of the discussion that I'm hearing and hope to clarify by this comment is who controls the process? This town council and the community as a whole, or project-specific developers coming in saying, "I want to do this here, and so let's amend the comprehensive plan and do that and redevelop the town piecemeal," as opposed to create the vision, what the community wants, and revise the comp plan and the land development code to reflect what that vision is, and then proceed.
Yeah, I think it's important, if anyone hasn't been paying attention on what's going on with South Seas up in Captiva, between the county and Captiva and Sanibel, I highly suggest you pay attention and you start looking, because that specific site is dealing a lot of what we're talking about. There's talk about heights that riled up the community. So there has to be a discussion with the community, again, through the process that we have, through the LPA, then to the council, about the willingness to change the comp plan. That's the way it has to go.
I think potentially some of the confusion comes through the CPD process, and I think that's why it's important for us to flush that out intellectually with our town attorney, so we can all better understand how that CPD process will work with some of the ideas that have been proposed, because it does allow flexibility for some of the ideas that have been proposed. But it does get confusing based upon what you just said, Mr. Mayor, as a result of that. I mean, it's not easy to project given those tools that are at their disposal.
Well, and I think everybody understands that changing the comp plan can be done. It's time consuming, but once it goes through the state and it comes back, so amending the comp plan is not going to be something that's going to happen very quickly.
Right.
And in order to change some of these thresholds, that's the only way you can do it, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, John? Is to amend the comp plan.
Correct.
So that needs to be the initial discussion. If there's a willingness to do that, then let's have that conversation. If not, then the direction is clear. This is.
Well, it's with all due respect, and I don't disagree with you, it's clear as mud, because an individual developer can ask for an amendment to the comp plan for their specific project. So I'm just saying it just complicates things, not necessarily in a bad way, not necessarily in a good way. It's just this is extremely complicated.
It's not.
And it's not, to Councilor Veach's point, it's hard to get direction about where all this is going to go, given the complexities of these tools.
Yes and no, because as the prior discussion we were having is that you have land use districts and zoning districts. Amending the comp plan to accommodate any particular project in any of those districts is going to now then apply to the district as a whole.
See, now, John,
These are not, you cannot, it's very difficult to amend
yeah,
the
I'm saying,
comp plan.
we're being told that something different. I'm not saying you're incorrect, but we're being told that you could amend the comp plan for a specific project that wouldn't affect other projects. Yeah, that's what at least this counselor has been told. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying this is why we need to flush all this out.
Yeah, I've not heard that.
Because there's a lot of confusion about these things.
I think that's a bit misleading.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just letting you know what we're being told. Yeah.
And what I'm kind of finding too, and part of the reason is this: there's this huge disparity between what we have in the comp plan and what we're envisioning for a future comp plan, and what some of these developments are envisioning, and that's creating a lot of uncertainty. It's like, to your thing, Vice Mayor, it's muddying the waters, and there's a lot of people who are not moving forward because of all this uncertainty.
And unfortunately, that is the world, and that uncertainty does create that dynamic, but that uncertainty also creates the excitement that's encouraging people to buy and build and rebuild here on the island as well. So it cuts both ways. If we didn't have these projects floating out there and there was no hope, and there was, we weren't seeing the cottage come back and the whale and all these other things and the outrigger, and I mean, I think that would create its own depressing piece of this puzzle. So it cuts both ways. I think there's an optimism amongst some of these rumored redevelopments that also creates and encourages as much as it can discourage some. Fair?
Yes, although I also, some of the things I've been, some of the perceptions also seem to be that are detached from reality. As I've been told by a couple of developers that right now there's no problem with density because traffic is light. But that's all these people, we're encouraging everyone to build back what they have by right. So, and in the discussion I had with DPI, Vice Mayor, you've had a really astute comment saying that we can't bind future councils. But if we approve a development, that's going to be there for 100 years. That in a way is binding future councils to something.
No question about it. Yeah, no question about it. But that's a different concept in practice, though, than what we were asked to consider on Tuesday. But your point's well taken. I'm just saying that this uncertainty cuts both ways, and that there's a lot of, because of some of the hopes and dreams of some of these proposals that have been put before us, I know a lot of folks are encouraged by that, and they're excited about it, and it's gonna rebuild some of the institutions that were here before, maybe some new ones. It's gonna be different. It's gonna be potentially exciting. We've got to be careful, but it also creates an optimism. If we didn't have some of this discussion, I would be pretty depressed. I mean, the island's gonna rebuild, and a lot of people are risking their capital, and they're coming forward. Maybe some of the ideas are too aggressive, but at the same time, there's activity, and that's encouraging. But to the points we heard earlier, we obviously need to focus a little bit more to try to encourage the mom and pops as well. But there's an optimism that this creates as well as a fear and a concern. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I could, I understand what you're saying, but I'm also kind of concerned that if we, I don't know if we just allowed everyone to build back exactly what they had by right. I don't know, in any kind of detail, how that would compare to before. I mean, before we had a lot of smaller cottages that we built back as bigger houses, but there's also probably some smaller hotels and things that may not rebuild if we didn't do anything. But I just don't think we know we can't afford more traffic. We can't afford to encourage more traffic. We don't have any solutions to traffic that are effective enough to offset that kind of development.
John, I got a question for you. And we're getting kind of into the weeds here, but this is just a quick question about CPD specifically. What you're allowed by right and what you can ask for through a CPD, or up to in the CPD to the comp plan. Is there a way that you can alter how a CPD, or is that state regulated, how a CPD works? Or can you, what I'm trying to say is I think it was Scott that said something about a $7,000 traffic study or whatever, depending, because the CPD is not scalable. It is what it is. Is there a way without amending a comp plan to adjust how a CPD is implemented or what you can and can't do through that process?
Certainly, yes. I would have to defer to, planning staff. But, if there's a provision in the land development code that says any CPD application must provide a traffic study, that can be modified to, for example, say, any CPD application proposing development of X square feet does not need a traffic study, and if it's above that, they do need to provide a traffic study.
Because I'm just trying to figure out how we can, most people I've talked about, and in speaking with Patrick Vaness from the LPA, who he represents a lot of people, they've all said that they can work within the intensities and densities that are within the comp plan. It's once you get down into the granular things, the units per acre and the doors and that kind of thing is where you get in the weeds. I'm just trying to think if there's a way through the CPD process, if you have to go that route, without completely changing everything, or site-specific, changing the comp plan for a site-specific project, how we could accommodate that. And maybe this is what the discussion should be in another MMP.
I don't disagree. I think that's something that we will discuss when the item comes back in August at that MMP, is to provide an outline to all of you as to what is required, and can it or can it not be scalable, which is an issue. And I know that Scott has mentioned that in the past with respect to certain properties that CPD is not well-written to accommodate some of those situations. It's certainly something that staff can look into, but I think to your specific point, yes, there are provisions within the CPD regulations that can likely be modified without having to necessarily make significant changes or any to the comprehensive plan, but I can't say that with 100% certainty.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll discuss this further at the August M&P when we have the discussion with.
The acronym soup discussion?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but to me, that's where the discussion should be. It should be through our joint meetings. I think it was a unanimous decision that everybody felt comfortable with being able to work within the intensity with what is in the comp plan now. So what is the next step? How can we make it? And based on what you said, John, initially, there's a potential process to be able to go through to maybe make it easier.
Correct.
Well, and again, Mr. Mayor, I don't disagree. We want everybody to work within the comp plan, but the comp plan includes tools like the ones that we're going to discuss in August that allows folks to vary from that. And I think those tools are important given the complexities of rebuilding on this island right now. And we as they have got to get through the council, got to get through the LPA. So it is the status quo, except there are tools within the status quo that allows folks to vary, and they've got to make the argument, they've got to make the pitch. So it's a little bit of both, quite honestly, right?
Yeah, that tool is the CPD.
That's right. That's right.
And that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Is if we can we legally adjust how a CPD is implemented based on different projects?
Yeah, no, these are great questions. Yeah, and same with the amendment to the comp plan. How does all that work in the big picture, and what's allowed, what's not allowed? And
All right.
yeah, I think it's worth.
We got some direction.
But I do know this, like, a lot of communities, they don't allow even a variance from the code. And I think the idea of just discussing that we're going to be, coming up with a new comp plan and working on it for years, and then talking about letting developers initiate changes to it kind of concerns me, because I think the comp plan is a much bigger hurdle to me than the land development code.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and people wonder why we're blabbering on, but it's the only time we have a chance to talk to each other, so I think it's really helpful. So that's true, but Councilor Veach, post-Ian, if we held to that standard, that strict standard, there would be very little rebuild, because so many folks have to build up, the cost of rebuilding, the cost of insurance, the cost of capital to recover, the cost of purchasing land. I mean, the business dynamics have changed so dramatically that the world has changed. And I just want to make sure we retain flexibility where it makes sense to allow for change to occur that's for the public benefit of this island. And that's obviously in the eye of every council person here, every member of the community, every member of the LPA. But we have to allow ourselves that kind of flexibility, because in this new post-Ian world, it's a new world, and it's a brave new world, but it's one that we're going to have to at least leave ourselves some flexibility to allow folks to do creative and interesting things. That's my opinion.
I'm going to take a shot in the dark at this, but I'd be willing to bet that the next M&P where we're going to discuss this, it might want to be the only topic on the M&P, because it's going to be a long one.
I don't know, look what we did with communication, that went on quite a ways.
Yeah. Well, and I just look, to your point, Vice Mayor, with the construction costs, with everything else, these developers or anyone trying to build anything, the cost is so high that the density comes into play, the size, the height. And the last thing we want to do is be sitting here 5 years from now with all of these purchases having fallen through because there's no direction, or they can't build, they can't, whatever it may be, and we're sitting here still with an empty island. So the flexibility is so key, and really discussing, I think we've all said, we don't want Miami, but there's some facets that maybe we do want. We want to keep our funkiness, our individuality, but how do we do it? And that's the direction that we need to go.
And I would think also, backing on what one of you said, is that I have certainly talked to a couple of developers in some of these projects coming up that have told me that they're okay doing what they did before with what they had, but if they can get more, they want more. It isn't a matter of saying yeah, so it's like, and we don't know. We're not looking at their books. We're not looking at their financial numbers. We don't know whether, Bob's development really needs 200 units or whether 50 would be economically feasible. So and they say that, but you're not really looking into their books. And also, when we did the Resilient Lee Town Hall, one of the questions was, under what circumstances would you support greater density? And the two circumstances that got the vast majority was never, or if there's sufficient public benefit. But to make someone's project economically feasible had a very, very small percentage, less than 10. So it's not, I don't think it's our role to make, especially these bigger developments, financially feasible. The other thing is when you have a small development, and sometimes, the developer has to think a little outside the box. You take Scott Safford, and they had a little hotel. It's a tough thing to recreate, but they're in a good location, so maybe they need the flexibility to be able to put in a mixed use that has a restaurant or something else. So a lot of development, based on the economics and what the business is, will not look the same, but that won't necessarily require additional density.
All right. For something that wasn't on the agenda, that sure took up some time. Anything else for agenda management?
That's it for me.
Okay. John?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, wait, hold on. John's got something. Wrong John.
Oh, you need to clarify some things.
I was looking at you. But
Actually, when you said John earlier, I was going to allow alcohol across the streets as well, so.
While I have you here, I just wanted to inform the town council that we have received a claim, an age discrimination claim by an ex-employee that is being processed through. It's been filed with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Office, the Commission, or which is a federal agency that vets these initially and then makes a determination whether or not they're going to get involved or not. Bottom line is that we've already run the matter through our internal conflict check system here, and also to the League of Cities. It is covered by our insurance carrier, the Florida Municipal Insurance Trust, that is administered by the Florida League of Cities, and so they will be picking up the cost and any potential monies that may be owed to this employee. As I said, it's an age discrimination matter by our prior employee by the name of, don't freak out on me, last name Rude. I'm sorry? Oh, he still works. I'm sorry. It's a current employee. Sorry.
Right, current employee.
Right, current employee. So, if you have any questions, please reach out to me offline. We can discuss it, but it's in its very preliminary stage of review and responding by outside counsel.
All right. Thanks, John. Anything else?
Correct. I'm sorry. No, nothing else.
All right.
You
John,
got a motion on the floor. I'll second that.
There you go. Got a motion and a second. Any objection? We're adjourned. Changed it up on you. I changed it up on you because I knew you were ready.
Checking to see if you're paying attention.
Got to keep you on your toes.